So we'll upload the audio to the website after the meeting, so it'll be a day or two or 3 or so.
Potentially, it could start at any point in time, though. He's working on it.
Or right away, Seth's working on it.
Yeah.
So,
This is a high-tech recording?
yes, so we will get the audio of the meeting on the website. It may just not be in real time.
Okay.
So with that, I will go over the items on the consent agenda. The first 3 items are minutes from previous meetings. Item 1 is the minutes from your regular meeting on December the 2nd. Item 2 is the minutes from your special meeting that you had on November 21st. That was the workshop that preceded a lot of what we're going to discuss later this evening. And then item 3 is approval of the minutes from the closed session on December the 2nd, and that should be on blue paper. Please review that and then pass it down to the city attorney when you're finished reviewing those.
I've reviewed it.
Then item 4.
I had one issue with the minutes. I do think it's a substantive change.
Okay. Which set?
The regular meeting on December 2nd. I had some minor changes which I can give to the clerk, but one substantive change that we had, remember we had the 2 consideration for the demolition. One was at 7212 Wilkinson and one was at 951 Kaysen. If you look at item number 6 on page 5, it talks about Councilwoman Stowe making a motion to defer action. It says 7212 Wilkinson Boulevard, but that's actually the item for the 951 Kaysen Street, so I think that should be changed in the last paragraph of item 6 to 951 Kaysen Street from 7212 Wilkinson Boulevard.
Good catch.
Thank you. And I had some other grammatical changes that I can...
We can argue on grammar.
I can pass them down. They're not substantive.
Thank you. Item 4 on the consent agenda is an amendment to Chapter 93 of the Code of Ordinances that deals with fire prevention and fireworks. And this is just a way to make sure that we don't have to go back and update this code every time there's a new addition to the fire code. Our Code of Ordinances references the North Carolina Fire Prevention Code from the year 2000, and that is periodically updated. So we would strike the references to 2000 and just have it to be the International Fire Code. That way, when that manual is updated, it automatically updates our ordinance. We don't have to go back through and do that. Item 5 on the consent agenda is an amendment to Chapter 72 of the Code of Ordinances, and it's our stopping, standing, and parking ordinance. And sort of in a similar vein to what I just described for the fire protection ordinance, this would streamline our parking restrictions. Currently in the ordinance, we should be listing each street and each side of each street where we limit on-street parking. So it should be an exhaustive list in the Code of Ordinances. So every time you approve a new subdivision with parking limitations, or we go in and change the parking, we should be doing that in the ordinance. That's tedious, and we may forget one. And so in order to be more comprehensive and just a lot easier to keep up with, if you'll see on page 69, we're just putting in a catch-all phrase that says, "It shall be unlawful to stop, stand, or park a vehicle on a street or on any public property owned or leased by the city in violation of an official traffic control device when such traffic control device gives notice of restrictions or prohibitions on parking," which is a fancy way of saying you can park on the street except for where the sign says you can't. And we will keep our list of all the limitations and restrictions separate outside of the ordinance, but this basically says you have to listen to the parking sign. This will help us keep up with the Code of Ordinances. And this language is borrowed from another city, so it's been reviewed. So this comes with a recommendation from the police department on that. Item 6 on the consent agenda comes from a request. Let me see if I can get this to work. This is... comes to us from a request from the Eagle Park Neighborhood Homeowners Association and was vetted through the city's, or the city council's Public Safety Committee, I guess in early December. And this is a busy map, but you have all the details of this in your packets. The Eagle Park Homeowners Association had submitted a request to the staff to reduce the speed limit from 25 miles an hour in the neighborhood to 20 miles an hour within the neighborhood, and to make further restrictions on on-street parking, and to prohibit on-street parking in certain locations. For the most part, on-street parking is allowed on one side of the street on most of the streets within the neighborhood. There are a few exceptions where on-street parking would not be allowed at all. And if you look sort of down here at the end of Bountiful Street, where there's sort of this Y intersection, that area is very tight, and there's really not room safely for on-street parking and cars to pass. There are also a couple areas on Blueberry Street and Assembly Street where there are bulb outs for on-street parking on both sides of the street, but then the street narrows, and there is not room for on-street parking where it narrows. So the recommendation is to prohibit parking on those two streets where it narrows, and just to let people park where there's actually built parking spaces on the street. One of the recommendations has to do with the area close to Belmont Central Elementary School. If I can get this cursor to move. So Assembly Street is both the street off of Eagle Road that serves as access to Belmont Central Elementary, but also an entrance into the neighborhood. And if you're there early in the morning or in the afternoons when school is letting in or letting out, you see that there's a lot of traffic there. So the recommendation is to restrict on-street parking during times of day where school is in session, particularly the pickup in the morning or the drop-off and the pickup. There was some discussion between the proposal from the Homeowners Association and the recommendation of the police department on on-street parking within that curve over here where there's some red dots, Assembly Street, as it goes past the school toward Lexington Street. The recommendation from the Homeowners Association was not to allow parking on the inside curve, only on the outside of that curve, on the north side of that street, due to visibility issues and the traffic, and particularly with children walking to school. It's just the curvature of the street plus the street trees, it just makes it very difficult to see. The police department investigated, and they recommended having no parking whatsoever in that curve, so on neither side of that curve. So that was a discrepancy between what the police department and staff was recommending and ultimately what the committee recommended versus what the Homeowners Association had requested. There are some areas where parking is already not allowed within a certain distance of an intersection, I believe some 25 feet of an intersection, and those areas are already signed. So this has been vetted by the HOA board of Eagle Park and presented to the Public Safety Committee. Public Safety Committee unanimously recommended what the staff was recommending, which is everything that the HOA was, but also without allowing any parking on that inside curve or outside curve of Assembly Street as it approaches Lexington Street. The committee asked we put this on consent agenda, but after the meeting was over, was notified that a couple people from Eagle Park wanted to speak on this matter. So if you keep this on the consent agenda, you will have already taken action on it prior to public comment. So people would be speaking on something that is on action that's already been taken. So if you want to hear from residents from the neighborhood, then just take this off the consent agenda and put it at the end of the regular agenda, and then allow people to speak at public comment. Would be the procedure.
I would motion to do that.
Okay.
I'll second.
So we won't take action in the work session, but when we go to approving the consent agenda, if you would, just pull that off and then
Yeah.
go, and we'll put that at the end, so that'll make that item number 8 on the regular agenda.
Okay.
And then also, just as another item for the agenda, I would request that you add a closed session to the end of the agenda, so after other business, to talk about the letter we received from Moore and Van Allen that I sent to you over the weekend. So when we go to open the meeting, we'll just add the closed session to the end of the meeting. That's all that I have for the consent agenda items. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Adrian? All right. Let's move on. We're close to our regular agenda time, so let's go ahead and move on to that and call the meeting to order. And we have Jim Hepburn's going to do the invocation for us, but we have the Scouts. Troop 56 are going to go ahead and do our Pledge of Allegiance for us, okay?
Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Communication. Heavenly Father, thank you for the opportunity to come and gather together this day. We ask for your hand of blessing on this meeting. We ask that you guide and direct our meeting so that it's full of wisdom, productivity, and respect for one another. We pray especially for those in the Middle East and those whose lives are threatened by the wildfires in Australia. Thank you for helping us to accomplish our work and our good deeds and goals this day. Amen.
Amen. All right, thank you. Anybody signed up for public comment? Kenny? Good job. Good job.
Well, before we do the public comment, would this be the appropriate time to at least motion to add the agenda items?
Yes, so we'll do the consent agenda prior to the public comment, so this will be a time to take a motion to move item 6 from the consent agenda and make it item 8 on the regular agenda, and then consider the rest of it.
And to add the closed session.
Wait. Why would you move that to item 8? Then they're going to have to sit here and wait through
Oh, you could do it.
two very long presentations, I presume.
Well, but it's not a public hearing, so, when we considered it, they wouldn't have, wouldn't they just speak during regular public comment
So
session?
so it's not a
Oh, but
public
then they'd
hearing.
still have to sit here until
Like
we,
a couple
yeah.
hours to see what happens. But
So we typically put public hearings at the beginning of the meeting, but you certainly have discretion to move it either
I think that's
to
reasonable.
the end or
I think, yeah,
put them right after public comment, if you'd like.
Yeah.
As much fun as the entire meeting might be.
They're certainly welcome to stay for the entire meeting.
All right, I would make that motion.
To make that item 2 then,
Yeah.
or 1.
Or one,
1A.
1A. And to add the closed session at the end of the meeting.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right,
Thank you.
discuss item 1A on the regular agenda.
We'll do public comment first, and then we'll do 1A.
Sure, I have several people signed up for public comment. And when you come up for public comment, state your name and your address. And you have 3 minutes to speak. I don't have my timepiece here. Scott, so he's going to set up a clock. 3 minutes. I don't know where my hourglass went, it's gone, so, anyway. But the first person we have signed up is Kathy Brown, 1054 Assembly Street. Kathy?
Good evening. I'm Kathy Brown, 1054 Assembly Street. So I'm here to address the parking issue that's on Assembly Street on the curve that he talked about. So I know that we have concerns on parking on the inner corner because it does decrease visibility. When I would like the committee to, I know that this is going to be looked at as kind of a whole picture. I would like for them to reevaluate this specific area on Assembly Street a little bit separately from this, saying that When we first heard about it, talked about it with Danny Van Haren, which is one of our HOA members, walked the line with some of the neighbors, and basically stated that the inside curb is a little bit dangerous and decreases visibility. So if we move parking to the outside curb, and we literally are talking like 3 spaces on the outside curb. I took pictures so that you could have to visually see what we're talking about. So it would be like 3 spaces. As soon as you turn the corner, there's 1 space. And then up towards the corner of Assembly, back 25 feet from the stop sign, there's enough for 2 cars. So the HOA, when we walked that with Dee, she agreed that we could probably make that work, and with decreased speed, it would also increase visibility because the parking would be on the outside curb. The safety committee also agreed that would probably work. But what happened was that the Belmont Police Department came in and said, we believe both sides of the street need to have no parking. And I guess part of my concern with that is, what if there is no parking along that whole area, and no parking like in front of the school? We have limited parking on the other streets. If we have services, example being I had a refrigerator delivered, where are they going to park? I mean, you cannot expect them to lug a refrigerator on a dolly a street a block over to get to the house. I also had a root ball in my storage, and they had to come in. I mean, they had to go back and forth to the truck. Where are they going to park? You can't be asking these services, delivery services, or whether we're calling them for repairs on our home, to park, on another street when they need access to their equipment. As far as myself, I have in the back of my home, I have a parking area for 1.5 cars, and that basically, there's no room for visitors or family to come.
Okay. Thank you very much, Kathy. All right, next person we have signed up to speak is Lisa Jenkins, 1060 Assembly Street. Lisa?
Thanks, everyone, for letting me to come in here and talk about parking. That's what I want to do. So it may not be a surprise that we have the 3 homeowners on that curve here today, me being one of them. I would like everyone to know that I was the 3rd or maybe the 4th person to buy an Eagle Park. I'm mostly concerned because those 3 homeowners specifically, and a couple more on Assembly Street, don't have garages, don't have parking pads. So the street parking is the only parking we have. I'm going to show you a couple pictures of what our alley looks like. Now, I do have a garage, but I don't have a driveway. It's very tricky. And this is Miss Elizabeth, myself, and Kathy's alley entrance. I second Kathy's request to reconsider parking on the opposite side, on the same side as the school on Assembly Street. This is about property values, and I will say that Eagle Park has been put on the map because of the homes that are on Assembly Street, and I don't think anybody can argue that. And it's out of respect for those original homeowners, Adrian being one of them, I would ask that you look at this, because I personally will have to move, and that's a huge burden. And there's 3 or 4 more other people that are going to be considerably put out. And we're talking about, when I say no parking, there's 1 car parking, and these are multiple, 2 or 3 car families. So I would appreciate you considering that for us.
Thank you. All right. Next person we have signed up to speak is Mark Fisher for public comment.
I'm Mark Fisher. I'm a resident of Belmont, 108 Knoll Court. I've been here for 30 years in the same house. And I'm also a volunteer for the Main Street program. I'm the chair of the Economic Vitality Committee. And I believe that this development of the Chronicle mill will be good for businesses. In fact, I think it'll be great for businesses, and I think it'll be good for the city in general. I think it will improve our walkability, and also in addition to that, I think it'll provide more of a connection between the downtown and the river district. So I'm just speaking on behalf of myself and also our Economic Vitality Committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate that. All right, that concludes our public comment. No one else has signed up. That brings us to considering an approval of a resolution. We're doing 1A, regular agenda. Okay. We moved that, okay. So,
Approval of changes to speed limit in on-street parking locations in Eagle Park neighborhood.
yeah, I was waiting for you. Yeah.
Yes, sir. So the Public Safety Committee met and did not hear from the speakers that you've heard from tonight, but did hear from representatives of the Homeowners Association. And you see the Homeowners Association presentation in your packets. We did have a disagreement between what the staff wanted and what the staff recommended and what the Homeowners Association was requesting. The committee did endorse the staff recommendation really the discrepancy was limiting the on-street parking in that curve. We see those three red dots. The staff recommendation is no parking at all in that curve. Now, the HOA was requesting parking just on the outside or the north side of the street, the same side of the street as the school driveway. I thought that I saw someone from the police department out there, and they may be able to answer questions as to why the police department felt that parking would be unsafe on both sides of the street.
That basically was the reason for the ruling, was the safety of the students walking to school?
I would defer to Sergeant Alan Buchanan is on his way and can answer those questions.
Okay.
Use your mouse and show three dots.
So the curve in question is basically right here from the intersection of Lexington Street back to the northern driveway of the school. There's kind of an exit here for the school, and then there's a driveway here and then an alley. Sergeant Buchanan, would you mind coming up here and put you on the hot seat?
You can bring Corky with you.
Were you able to hear the public comments?
I did not. I'm sorry.
So going over all of the parking restrictions on Eagle Park, we've talked about the Public Safety Committee that you've met with the HOA about. The police department and staff recommendation and Public Safety Committee recommendation was for no on-street parking within this curve between the driveway of the school and the intersection of Lexington Street. But the three residents who own property on this side were requesting that the city council consider allowing parking on the outside of the curve, because that is really their only parking space.
All right. So what I would say is, when I looked at this, when we looked at this department, we looked at state law as well as city ordinances. State law is a vehicle cannot pass the center line of the highway or center line of the roadway unless there is some sort of an obstacle there. If we put parking signs up and allow parking there, we're creating that obstacle. So really, we would be in violation of state law, 20-146. But it's not safe. If you had 3 lanes, if the road was wide enough, you had 3 lanes, and you could have a parking lane and then 2 lanes that could pass where somebody would not have to cross that center line, then you'd be fine. But with putting parking there, somebody would cross that center line, and what you get into is, if you had a crash, if you had a head-on collision, then somebody has crossed that center line of the roadway, and they're in violation of state law there. then, so.
How many houses are involved in this? 3 houses, you said? On this?
Well, there are several houses that front Assembly Street in this location. They have their access on the rear alley, and some have garages and some do not have garages off that rear alley. But they're on the north side of the street. There, you see, here's the driveway to the school. There's a house here with a front-loaded garage. Then there's a second house here with driveway and garage that's side-loaded off of this alley. And then this house here fronts Lexington Street and has its access off that rear alley. So there is room for 2 or 3 parking spaces. I would certainly agree with that, but no more than that on this outer curve.
Now, I actually went back and looked at the roadway with Miss Van here. I don't know if she's, there she is. Ironically, while we were out there looking at that, we almost saw a wreck.
Yeah.
With somebody they were parked on the inside of the curve and they were turning around, but they were on the outside of the curve as a car was coming around. So even with them being on the outside of the curve, that car, they saw them in just enough time to get stopped, basically. So they avoided the collision, but it was pretty eye-opening to see that, as it happened. We also talked about some additional parking spots there between Hospitality Lane and Lexington. The problem we run into is even at 25 foot back from the intersecting curb line, if, say, a minivan or an SUV is parked on that right-hand side of the road, somebody is going to have to go around that car and they're crossing the center line again. If there's a car heading south on Lexington and they come to the intersection waiting to turn, the probability of them not being able to see around that parked vehicle is really high. So there's a chance that they could come out and make a left on Assembly headed back towards the school with somebody over the center line on Assembly. And then again, you're getting in that, we're making it available for a crash to happen.
Yeah, there's a recommendation for the speed limit to be reduced to 20 miles an hour.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Would that make it any safer if we were able to do that?
It's,
Just trying to think about the people that lived there, that have bought and moved in the
Sure.
beginning,
Sure. So at 20 miles an hour, the crash would be a lot less severe. But it's not gonna, and I don't mean to be funny or I'm not trying to be ugly about it, but that's taken, that you're expecting somebody to obey the 20 mile an hour exactly. If somebody's running 22 or 23, just that couple mile an hour difference can mean the difference in getting stopped and not.
Yeah. I don't think you're allowed to make a 15, are you? Close to the school.
You have the discretion to set the speed limit on the city. You have discretion on the speed limit on the city street, but the recommendation from the police department is 20, and the request from the HOA is 20.
Okay.
Can I speak just 1 second?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to state that, he's saying that we have to cross the center line, but our whole community only allows one side street parking. So even on the other streets, it's not just this area that you have to go around. It's on every street because of the way the community was developed. So it's not just crossing the center line in this area. It's every other street. Lexington, where it's one way, you have to go on the other side. And you have to be courteous if you've got someone coming, against you, who goes first and that sort of thing. So speed limit is definitely a factor.
Right, and I'll address that. My biggest concern in looking at it and in actually being out there is line of sight. Because most of the places that you've got cars parked and somebody's gonna have to go around that vehicle would be straight roadways, and the line of sight is much greater. With that particular curve, with the trees and the lay of the land and the homes so close, your line of sight, it dwindles to almost nothing as you're going around that curve and as you start entering that curve from either
I
direction.
took pictures so that they could at least visually see.
But you don't disagree with Ms. Brown's statement that, all the, so if that road is in violation, technically the other roads would also be.
If it wasn't for the curve and the roadway, and the other street being so close in the line of sight the way it is, yes, I would agree with that completely. It's because of the curve. The curve plays a big factor in it, and the line of sight issues due to all the obstacles around there, the trees, the setback from the homes. Even with the setback from the homes, you still don't have that line of sight needed, because it's so compact.
Was
right
the-
there. If it wasn't for the curve, I don't think we'd have such an issue with it, because it's, it's more allowable because there's no line of sight issues from the different intersections. Does that make sense?
Is there a sign that we could possibly put up, potential for children crossing or whatever? I mean, that's a safety issue anyways, the kids that would be crossing.
Is the issue line of sight, or is the issue the narrowness of the road where you have on-street parking throughout the development, which forces the violation of state law?
So I can tell you that there are places in the neighborhood where the road is just as tight as the curb, and there is on-street parking. But I can't, as the police department, I'm speaking for the police department now, we can't put our stamp of approval on putting parking places there, and then somebody having a crash down the road, and then, oh, well, the police department approved this parking here. So our suggestion is no parking on either side, just because it's dangerous. If you've got kids, as the mayor said, you've got the school there with kids coming out, kids running across the street. The curb's dangerous anyways, just because of the curb and the lay of the land. And then if you add cars that people are having to go around, it's just dangerous. It's just dangerous.
Now, the houses that have parking spaces in front of them right now, do they have garages and driveways where they can park in there? They have to?
I think it depends on the house. I think it depends on the street.
Yeah.
That's an HOA could probably answer
Yeah.
better.
This is public safety.
It is, this particular neighborhood was built during the time frame where narrow streets were set up, partially because it's cheaper, but also because if you have narrow streets, the idea is people will go slower, as opposed to my neighborhood, you have broad avenues, and so there's a difference of opinion with developers as far as what's the best option. I'm on the committee. If we're not going to do the whole project at this point, I think we need to let the committee go back and reevaluate and maybe go on the site and just do the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, because there's safety issues, there's property owners issues, and to my way of thinking, we did this because the property owners wanted it. If this is not what they want, then we definitely need to do the 20-hour speed limit, and then maybe, as a committee member, I'm fine to go out there and actually look myself before we do that, because I don't want to jeopardize anybody, but at the same time, I don't want to penalize the property owners, if that makes sense to them.
That is a good point. I would agree with that, because I notice this is not something that the police department came and said,
Right.
we want, this is at their behest, and they might have gotten more than they bargained for. And so I do think they shouldn't necessarily be penalized for trying to improve their neighborhood, and we should see what we can do. So
What is our minimum road width now that we allow? What is permissible for a minimum road width as far as our ordinance
I
goes?
think it's 28 feet.
It's not 28? Okay.
how wide are these roads?
This assembly,
I measured an assembly line
22.
yesterday, and it's 24
is it 24?
on the curve, right up to, all the way down. It was 24. Lexington going across was 22.
Okay, because
And there's one side parking on that 22. So
the reason I asked is when I was on planning and zoning, Ryan, I went out there either with David or Lauren Packard, and we put a tape on the road, and it was 22 feet, which was exactly the minimum allowable. So I think that's kind of what drove the discussion to increase to wherever we are now, but, I mean, I don't know, is 28 feet is what we have now?
I believe. We can verify with the Land Development Code.
I'm happy to do whatever council does, but we just heard from the police department saying this is a public safety issue, it's dangerous, and there could be an accident. And I don't feel comfortable. I know it's not popular, but it wasn't our idea, it wasn't the police department's idea. Eagle Park brought it to us. We've identified a issue where somebody could be seriously hurt, and I have a hard time sitting here in front of a group of Boy Scouts saying that we're going to put convenience ahead. But I'm perfectly happy to go out there. If there's any loopholes, happy to do that. But
Well, Parks, I mean, what's the city's position or the police department's position, since they've brought this to our attention, if we are in violation of state law by forcing traffic out? I mean, are we culpable if we take no action?
Potentially.
What if we adopt the recommendation and then also re-refer this to the Public Safety Committee for additional study, discussion.
I'm sorry, say that again, Mark?
You can't do that.
I was suggesting that we adopt the recommendation as presented, but then also have the Public Safety Committee look at if there's something else we can do more long-term, I think that would be the most appropriate avenue to explore that. And in the meantime, we've at least preserved the public safety, or taken care of the public safety issue. And that way, if we need to change something, we've got, if we identify another solution, we've got a process in place to do that. Unless there's nothing we can do, in which case, I guess we just need to make a decision.
We're not opposed to looking at anything, and I've gone out with Ms. Vineyard and looked at several things, but as far as our stance on parking in the curb, it's going to remain no parking either side. So.
Or would there be any point then to throwing it back to the Public Safety Committee, Martha?
Well, that's why I said, I think at the minimum, we need to at least do the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, because it is a safety issue. And then if y'all want to throw it back to us, that's fine.
Anybody in favor of putting it back in the Public Safety Committee and let them discuss it again? Or, because I know we're violating the state law, we got to be careful with that too. Especially if there's an accident or somebody gets hit or something like that. It's dangerous.
Well, I'd at least like to exhaust every effort before, I might very well ultimately find myself in agreement with Ryan as an attorney and someone who's always concerned about the law. That might very well be where we end up, but I think we owe it to the residents to try and do whatever we can before we, if that's the inevitable conclusion we reach, at least we gave it a good faith effort, and this is sort of came up after the Public Safety Committee meeting, so I'd at least like to, put everyone's heads together and give it one more shot. And we've got some bright people involved, so maybe somebody can come up with a solution.
That's fine,
Let's at
as
least
long
try
as
and
we
give it
just accelerate it and don't wait till next month and all that stuff.
Are you wanting to adopt the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit now and look at the parking as a separate issue, or?
I'll make a motion that we do that and send it back to the committee, which means that it's coming back to me.
There's something pertinent I think that she needs to tell you. We've actually discussed, so up on the corner back behind this home, there's an area that's like grassy area there, and it belongs to the school board, but right now there's nothing there. It's outside the gates for the actual school. If we could potentially turn that into a parking lot or something like that.
Can you highlight that? Is that what you're pointing at right there?
Sorry, let me.
Look at this mouse.
I am, that's the area right there?
Is that the area you're talking about?
No.
A little higher?
On the other side, yeah, right there. That's the Curry's backyard, but further back, yeah, right there. Right
I'm sure
there.
they won't mind.
So that.
So the walkability would be fine if we built a parking lot back there?
I mean, it's
I'm not building a
because
parking lot back there.
whether you guys come and do
You guys.
a walkthrough, I've walked it through with
Do you think
that would
a number of times.
enough parking to satisfy your needs, these three homes?
Oh, yeah, I think it would definitely help, but the problem is it belongs to the school board, and we've asked them for it before, and they've told us no. And so, but there's nothing there right now, like I said, it's outside of the fence, but is this something that you guys could help with or alleviate, or?
I'm not opposed to approaching the school board if that helps with
I think so.
resolution
Yeah.
to this.
I mean, they might give us the same answer, but yeah, I mean, it might,
It's worth a try.
yeah.
Could we, because we're having issues in the rest of the neighborhood, is there a way that we could just take out the assembly curb and pass the rest so we can start putting signage up for the rest of the neighborhood?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Oh, just see it, is there a way that we could pass the rest, because this is all the red dots that you see are new signage. Is there a way, if you guys do want to postpone this kind of vote, is there a way that you could remove the assembly curb and pass the rest of the neighborhood? Especially because we need, it'd be nice to have no parking during the school zone, during the school times.
I think we can do that.
That's up to the.
Yeah.
Take action on everything except for that curve of assembly.
Motion
I think
would
that's a
be
good idea,
to adopt the plan minus the curve in assembly for further study.
Yeah.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Got a second, all in favor, say aye.
But you didn't refer the other to the committee, or you were just gonna leave it alone? I mean, it's fine, because I voted aye myself, I just wanted clarification.
You can direct us to have the police department and the neighborhood can meet out there with the public safety committee, and we'll
Okay.
schedule a meeting.
I would amend the
That's what I'm
motion to
asking.
adopt that language then.
Okay.
All right. Very good. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your help on that, thank you. All right, next item we have is consider the approval of the...
I think they're down here.
I told you that was going to happen. We had the public safety meeting. Is everybody on board?
Pictures, okay. I think that'd be a fair thing to do, keep a little time on that. And hope there's no wrecks. All right. Waiting time to council. We ready?
Yes, sir.
Item number 2. All right, consider the approval of a resolution establishing the City of Belmont Historical Mill Adaptive Reuse Investment Grant Program.
Thank you, Mayor. If you recall, the City Council held a special meeting on November the 21st of last year to hear incentive requests from the Chronicle Mill and the River West Business Park. And during that meeting, we discussed the city's existing economic development tax grant incentive program for industrial properties that the City Council approved in 2006, and we've used several times for business recruitment and relocation and expansion here within the city. The Chronicle Mill did not fit into that plan because it's not an industrial project. And so the council asked that we draft a new program that would be similar to our existing program, but would be specific toward the adaptive reuse of historic mills. So in your packet, beginning on page 88, is a resolution establishing an adaptive, historic mill adaptive reuse program modeled after our industrial incentive program. This would be for historic mills, whether or not they're on the National Register of Historic Places or designated as a local historic landmark, but generally that are more than 50 years old and would be adaptively reused. And the intent of the incentive program is to encourage the reuse and redevelopment of these mills, because in some cases it can be cheaper to tear them down and build something new, which we've seen throughout town, than it is to redevelop them. And so this program is modeled after the industrial incentive grant program, where after the project is built, Gaston County Tax Office would assess a tax value for the property. The property owner would pay all the taxes that are owed to the city and the county, and then the city would then reimburse a portion of those taxes each year for a set number of years. There's a list included in this resolution. It's the list of, and it's based on the amount of private investment. It's the same list that we have for our industrial incentive program, but in this one would be considered on a case-by-case basis. I sent this to you a couple times over the last month for comment. Councilman Seelinger had a good suggestion that we have some sort of clawback provision in the event that someone were to redevelop a mill but then tear it down for some reason. So we did add, I did recommend that we add that if the mill is demolished more than 10 years after, within the 10 years of redevelopment, then we have basically a clawback provision where the property owner would have to repay the city the entire amount of the grant.
That's fair enough.
And Councilman Schrift asked me to try to identify the number of mills that would be eligible for this type of program. I identified 9. I think I found a 10th one today when I was going back over the GIS. So these are the 9 mills that I found on GIS that are historic textile or dye mills that are more than 50 years old. I believe the other one would have been Spectrum Dyers on the Catawba River, which is now home of Muddy River Distillery and
That's right.
Alternative Beverage, and has a marina there. That was built, I believe, in the 40s, according to the GIS.
Yeah.
So nonetheless, there's around 10 total mills that would be eligible according to this. I think of this list, Spartan Dyers, of course, is still in operation. Parkdale Mill, number 15 on Woodrow, is still in operation. The rest have been redeveloped for different purposes, some industrial, some non-industrial. But this would be the property is eligible for this grant program if you choose to adopt it.
And Adrian, probably fewer than half of those have any architectural interest as far as, I mean, because of what's happened to them and the lack of, I don't know, just architectural interest. So I don't think we'd be looking at that possibility of 10 ever showing up in front of us. Would you think that as well?
I would think so. I mean, some of these mills are in better shape than others, and some have more architectural variety than others. Just like the Chronicle mill was covered up, some of these have been covered up with construction brick. The intent of this is to encourage historic preservation. Of course, we've had a vibrant discussion about historic preservation for the past 5 or 6 years, and so this is a tool that we would have to promote historic preservation of our historic mill properties. And one thing that I learned through that discussion is just because something is pretty or it's cute doesn't mean it's historic, but it can be historic with it being, as long as it's true to its time period. And so some of these are not.
Do you think a program like this would have potentially saved the Imperial Mill from being torn down?
That mill suffered from some maintenance issues, but this certainly would have been something we could have offered, would have made it more attractive. I mean, I'd like to think that this is something that would have saved that mill.
Yeah.
If we were to pass this, would the Chronicle proposal, would that in fact be eligible for it then, or based on the timing of their proposal, would it, since it was before, we would have, we noticed the hearing before this was adopted. I'm just, do you understand my question?
If you adopt this, it will be in effect at the time of your public hearing, yes.
Okay. So then there would be a grant program.
There would be a grant program in place.
Yeah.
And they would be the first applicant.
In answer to your question, Ryan, it probably would have saved it. The biggest problem with the Imperial was the economic situation at the time. It was not as interesting to people to develop the property here as opposed to what it is now.
Yeah.
The proximity to an active rail line also turned off a lot of people that were interested.
Yeah, because we had
noise.
looked at possibly doing a library or something, so you had to have more public use than homes or residential use.
But we certainly didn't have any tools available to help them.
As part of this program, I think you touched on it, I may have missed it, I'm looking for it, but does it have to have architectural merit to qualify at all?
No, sir.
No. But I think the historical value and presence of an older building like that in our community, especially downtown, you don't see too many of those around anymore. Like I say, we got rid of the Imperial, and that was something that was, could have been possibly developed. And I think this would be great.
We certainly have the ability to take that into account because, each, I know it does say something that each is considered, on its own facts and merits, so, we could weigh that accordingly.
Yeah, you would certainly consider them on a case-by-case basis. So if you had a project that was coming to you for a grant that was not doing anything to either honor the history of the building or to make it more historically accurate, to remove newer features to bring it back to its historic roots, you could deny it, or you could say we'll approve this if you do these architectural features to the.
Gives us more ammo.
Gives you more leverage over.
What if the building's been altered? I mean, does that work as well, or the plans are to substantially alter the original building?
You would do this on a case-by-case basis, yes, sir.
Remember, that's what cost the Chronicle, in other words, there's a substantial change that had happened, and so it couldn't qualify for the historic credits. So we'll still look at that as well.
Yes.
All right.
I just got a note here for the record. We received a letter from the Catawba Riverkeeper. We would, and this is just one segment from it, we would, however, encourage municipalities to promote adaptive reuse projects such as redevelopment of old mills. Without the promotion of these reuse developments, the inevitable development of Belmont will be pushed to untouched green space that is vital to the health of our watershed and more broadly to our environment. Development of green space is of significantly more negative impact than adaptive reuse development. Sounds like there's some environmental components, and I don't pretend to be an environmental expert, but I just received this letter when I walked in, so.
Well, I mean, and again, I think we're sort of meshing the policy itself with the hearing we're about to have, but certainly the Chronicle project, as I understand it, there's brownfields and they are cleaning up, so that would tie in with what you just read.
Well, I mean, I do like the Catawba Riverkeepers, but I think it's a little Pollyanna to think that if we adopt an adaptive reuse grant, that somehow these green spaces will survive. That's not going to happen. If there's a green space available, it will most likely be built on.
I have a question. Since this is modeled off our industrial economic development incentive program, do you know roughly how many grants were paid out under that program?
We talked about 2.
There's just one I can remember was U.S. Cotton.
U.S. Cotton was the most recent.
Yeah.
Was Parkdale one?
10 years.
Because something that occurred to me today was that if this is modeled off of that, and we didn't receive more than 2 grants, or pay out more than 2 grants over the course of 14 years, I'm wondering how effective this will be if it's basically using the exact same model as that program.
So these, with possibly the other one on the river, would be about the only ones. So you have the opportunity for 10 grants. It's best I can tell. I don't think you're going to get twice this. I think you'll get around 10 potential applicants, and you probably won't get 10.
Yeah.
We, on the industrial side, when developers come to us, which is unusual, it's more generated through the EDC office, and we have a potential business relocation or expansion within the city. That's when we activate that program. That's a tool that we have for that.
So we've had one.
We've had one that was very successful on the industrial, which is the U.S. Cotton Parkdale Mill project on Parkdale Drive.
We've had none without it, or have we?
Other than that, we had an industrial user on the Acme Mill site, which is now the River West Business Park, that ended up going to Bessemer City. I think that given a variety of factors, including our land prices, including our topography, because we're on a ridge with drainage into 2 rivers, it's going to be really hard for us to attract very large-scale industrial development when there's land that's easier and less expensive to develop west of here within Gaston County.
I mean, I would think that the fact that we've only done 2, and there's only a couple up to 10 that would be eligible for the historic adaptive reuse. I think that sort of augurs. I would take the opposite line of thinking that, I would be concerned that if we adopted it would be overused, and the fact that, it's a tool that we can have in appropriate circumstances, but, it's as the history has shown, it's not going to be overused. That would be my concern, is the overuse. But it's something that we'd have in our tool bag, in our bag of tricks for the appropriate situation. So, I am, it makes me more comforted by the fact that it's not been overused than underused.
Yeah. I just feel like that, since we're sandwiched between Gastonia and Charlotte, it's going to be very difficult for us to compete on a cash basis with what either of those 2 cities are ever going to be able to offer. And I don't want to see us in a situation where we're incentivizing something that was going to happen anyway, and that, that we're taking money to spend on this, or refund, or however you want to say it, that could theoretically be spent on something else that would have more impact for the whole community. Like, I'm not opposed to the idea of an adaptive reuse program. I just don't know that cash grants or tax grants are the way to go with it. Just because I think that competitively, what's our budget, $15 million? It's going to be tough for us to really, I think, offer anything that's going to be able to move the needle, especially when you're talking about the size of some of these buildings, the age, the existing issues that need to be fixed. Like, if you're pouring millions of dollars into a project, I don't know how a couple $100,000 is basically a rounding error, in my opinion.
I think the beauty of this is that it's not cash out of the city's coffers. It's money that is coming to the city that otherwise wouldn't if these projects didn't happen. And then you take a portion of the money that we otherwise wouldn't have and return it to the developer, the property owner, for a short amount of time, and then you get the rest of the money, 100% of the money, as long as the property stands. I think that given our discussion over the last several years about historic preservation, this is a tool that we would have that we currently don't have to promote historic preservation of our mills, because that is so closely tied to our identity. If the owners of any of these properties came to us and said, we'd like to tear down our property and build something brand new and shiny, they'd have every right to do it, and we would certainly caution them. We would prefer that they redevelop their property and keep the community character as our comp plan calls for, but we wouldn't have any tools to financially reward them for doing that, and this would be a tool that we have to help them, encourage them to adaptively reuse their mill property.
Is there anything that would prevent us from making a ad hoc grant for the right situation? I don't know if that's more of a legal question, but...
Well, so when the Chronicle mill team first came to us, it was sort of an ad hoc request. It didn't fit neatly into our existing program, so the council directed us to create a program so that we could offer it not only to the Chronicle, but to other historic textile mills. I don't know that you have to have this in order to offer an incentive for redevelopment, but this allows us to have something at the ready, so the next time somebody comes in and says, we want to develop, diversified specialties or NC filtration or a Parkdale mill, we have a tool ready on day one. We don't have to go through this process and have uncertainty at the city council.
Do other communities have these adaptive reuse programs?
I'm not aware of any right around, but...
We have at the county use these on other occasions. The Esquire Hotel in downtown Gastonia, the county amended their policy to match Gastonia to do it. We offered it to the Chronicle, to the mill in Bessemer City, the Osage Mill. That project has not yet manifested itself, but it's still out there for them to use, so we offered our grant to them. Because we felt like it was a good way. These were key pieces of property in areas where it was an integral part of trying to redevelop the downtown. And to try to push it over the edge and give it some more depth and make it work, we were willing to put our money into it. Because right now we're not really receiving a lot of tax value on it. And all three of those buildings were really negative to the image of all three cities. And so we've done that in the county. We've helped Cherryville with a long-term care facility. They were losing theirs. So we used that as a way to help them build a nicer facility maybe than they would have otherwise in Cherryville.
So the county has an adaptive reuse program?
We use our existing policy, and then we just make it fit to each circumstance. If the commissioners want to do it, they'll take our existing policy and say we'll make it applicable to this project for these identified reasons.
Okay.
It's been beneficial.
What I was driving at is that, what you said is we took our industrial grant program and just erased the name and put adaptive reuse on it. And what I was getting at is, did we look at possibly potentially any other communities to see if there are any nuances or languages maybe we should have looked at instead of just a title transfer on a document?
So I did more than that. If you'll read the resolution, it talks about our community character and compliance with our comprehensive land use plan. I did keep on page 90, the breakdown is the same as the industrial, but the intent and the purpose and the language is different.
Now, why would we keep the same, just play devil's advocate, why would we keep the same dollar amounts for adaptive reuse as we would for industrial?
Because it was what the city council had already adopted.
I guess that kind of speaks to another one of my concerns, is that I do kind of feel like we're rushing a little bit. I feel like from a policy perspective, like this happened very quickly. You know, it was first proposed in November. We first got the draft of this proposal back in the middle of December, and here we are, first week of January, voting on it.
This is how it works.
We've been dealing with this for 8 years.
I mean, you gotta read the couple 100-page reports, you gotta go do your research, you can't wait to get public feedback from social media and all that stuff. You gotta
Well, no, we have
get
a
prepared and make
historic
decisions.
preservation advisory board that is designed to solicit citizen input on things like this, and that was one of the comments that I made when this first came out, was that, you know, I think that there are other resources like our committee or a board that should have been involved with this, because I think that there are a variety of perspectives, different views that can be incorporated into this, and, you know, I don't pretend to know everything. I don't think everybody up here knows everything. So I think there's no harm in making sure that we get it right the first time, rather than just kind of slapping something together and seeing what sticks, which is...
Was the Historic Preservation, did they have any input on this?
No. The council directed me to come up with this and bring it to you, which I've done.
Did you just slap this together, or did you put a thoughtful effort into it with your staff?
I put thoughtful effort into it.
I do also have a question for our council regarding the legal structure of the payments. In the general statutes, Chapter 105, Section 380 reads that the governing body of a taxing unit is prohibited from releasing, refunding, or compromising all or any portion of the taxes levied against any property within its jurisdiction, except as expressly provided in this subchapter. So I have seen that particular statute phrase is a potential stumbling block to grant programs that are structured like this. So I would like to get an opinion on whether you think that this complies with that or not.
I'm not able to give you that opinion right now without looking at that statute in detail, because it has language in there about other provisions of the statute, so I hadn't had any research done.
Thank you. All right. Anybody want to entertain a motion that we take the recommendations?
I'll make a motion, we approve as is.
Got a motion?
I'll second.
Got a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Opposed.
2 opposed, 3 ayes. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda, public hearing on the economic development incentives for the Chronicle Mill redevelopment project.
Before we go into public hearing, I want to make a statement. As a result of a post on one of our city council people's Facebook page, I've been accused of having a pecuniary interest in the Chronicle Mill project and other substantial projects, and that is not correct. But unfortunately, people put information on social media and nobody responds to it, which should have happened. Then the person accused must say something, so I want to make sure everybody is aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. All right, item number
So this requires a public hearing for economic development incentives, so we need a motion to go into
I'll
public
make a
hearing.
motion to go into public hearing.
Second.
Second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, we're in public hearing. No one has signed up to speak, so whoever wants to...
Thank you, Mayor. I will introduce this item, and then the development team for the Chronicle Mill has prepared a presentation, and they would like to present to you and answer questions about why they're requesting this incentive request. So the City Council has just created an historic mill adaptive reuse program. The first applicant would be the Chronicle Mill project. As you heard during your November 22nd special meeting, the Chronicle Mill has requested a tax grant incentive program to help offset the cost of the project for redeveloping the Chronicle Mill. What they are requesting is, as Councilman Heffernan alluded to during the previous discussion, the Chronicle Mill has received a Brownfield Agreement, which does have property tax abatement over 5 years. And that is a state program that we have no control over, and that is to encourage the adaptive reuse of generally industrial, but not limited to industrial sites in town that are contaminated, need to be cleaned up, and then put back on the productive use on the tax rolls. So the Chronicle Mill does have an active Brownfield Agreement, which will offset some of its property taxes in the first 5 years after it's developed. The development team has requested an additional incentive program. That's the Brownfield is a state program. They were requesting the city program. It would not meet all the that listing of the finances on page 90 of the historic reuse program. Instead, they're asking for something that is actually less generous than what we would allow or would consider. They're asking for a rebate of 70% of their property taxes each year for 5 years once those Brownfield agreements taxes roll off. So the way this would work is they would pay, after development of the property, Gaston County would give an assessment of the property value. They would pay 100% of the property taxes due to the city, and the city would pay back 70% of that each year for 5 years. And so the total, so we don't know the actual value of this grant because the Gaston County Tax Office has not assessed the final redevelopment of the site because it hasn't been redeveloped yet.
Right.
But upon the final assessment of the value of that property, the property owner would pay 100% of the taxes to the city, and then if approved, the city would reimburse them 70% of that for 5 years. We estimate, based on the developer's projections of the cost of redevelopment, that over 5 years, we would pay $388,234 over 5 years for the incentive grant. What's important to note is we would still collect $166,386 in property taxes over that same 5-year period.
Okay.
We would receive $137,671 per year, every year, in property taxes after the grant has expired. And just by comparison, we're currently collecting $1,641.51 in property taxes based on the current valuation of the project. Councilman...
Sorry, just... hold on.
So it's almost 100 times increase after the grant's expired if the property's redeveloped over what we're currently collecting.
Yeah.
Councilman Swift asked me to estimate the water and sewer revenue generated by users at the Chronicle Mill in addition to the property taxes. And based on, so the Chronicle Mill, as approved in the conditional rezoning, consists of 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom units. Based on sample 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom apartment unit water bills from the Palisades on Wilson Boulevard, I estimate that the Chronicle Mill would generate approximately $106,000 a year in water and sewer revenue. So that's in addition to property taxes. Now, that's obviously in the utility fund, not the general fund. So those are the highlights of the tax grant program. The Chronicle Mill team is here and would like to present their request to you and answer your questions, unless you have any questions of me beforehand.
I have one question for just a statement of Parks. What Mark said about the statute, can you follow up on that? Because I'd be curious to see if there are any conflicts in that language and let us know.
All right, see if I can operate the machinery correctly here. City Council Mayor, thank you for having us back, and Happy New Year to all.
Same to you.
We're here to revisit the Chronicle Mill project and talk a little bit more about the incentive grant request that we have for the project. Quickly on the background of the project, as you all know, the mill itself, was created in 1901 and has been a long-standing building in the downtown community. And as we've discussed before, our plan is to redevelop and repurpose the existing mill and then create new real estate as a component of the project to further increase the tax basis for the project to the community and create a vibrant live, work, play community immediately adjacent to the downtown Main Street
district to help try to, create a great opportunity for new residents to the community to find a place to live at an affordable level and also to be able to support the downtown businesses. So as we spoke previously, we're looking at doing approximately 240 multifamily units and about 8,600 square feet of retail space, plus some live-work units where a single proprietor owner could live and have their business operate in the same building. We're looking to create some public space on the Chronicle Green adjacent to the retail level where folks can gather and socialize. And, the attractiveness of the project along the proposed thread trail and trolley line, again, makes for a great hub related to all of those amenities that the city is looking to create for its residents. A couple of things we thought was important to speak about regarding the need for a project like this within the community is the economic impact that a project like this will bring to the Main Street corridor. And we did some research on the economic impact of a household of this economic range within a district and did some quick research in the math that generates the economic impact to the downtown community based on 240 units at a $19,000 annual economic impact per unit generates about $4.5 million of spending dollars within the community. So if these are residents that are new to the community, new to the downtown district, the math says that there is about $4.5 million of economic impact to the downtown district related to their spending power and obviously the sales taxes that go along with that. This does not include their water and sewer bills, as was mentioned just a minute ago by Adrian. And in addition to that, there's obviously the jobs that come along with new development, and during the construction of the project, obviously, there would be significant construction employment related to the project. Typically, a project of this size is going to have, probably peak out at 100 guys on the site at one time. Kind of average probably 30 to 50 people a day on the project. But related to the long-term effect, on the multifamily component, the management of the property will generate probably between 5 and 6 long-term jobs, and then in the retail component, based on the square footage we're dealing with, we estimate somewhere between 19 and 22 permanent jobs as well on the retail component. So we're looking at somewhere in the mid-20s in new job growth for the community. So the way that we tried to look at the investment program and other communities that we work with, the term that is being adopted as these programs come through the community is it's a performance-based grant. When the developer performs, he gets the benefit. So if we perform and we build the project and we perform and we pay our taxes, then we get the benefit back. So we are basically funding the cost of the project up front out of our side of the account, so to speak. And then we are basically using the benefit of a reduced tax bill to pay ourselves back through the course of time through the grant program. So we have to perform in order to receive the benefit. It's not asking the city for an upfront grant that you have to worry about a clawback or getting some kind of protections on the tail end. So it's truly what's been defined as a performance-based grant. The other thing that we looked at on the analysis that we prepared in order to make the request to Adrian and staff was that we were trying to create a win-win model. We were not looking for 100% of taxes. We were not looking for a long-term process that did not provide benefit to the city over and above what the mill is currently paying today. So the model we created, basically, we took into account what we were getting from Brownfield. We took into account, the requests that we had, and we kind of looked at everything. We said, okay, over time, we need to make this a win for our project, but also a win for the community. And so as you hopefully have looked through the model we created, you'll see that total taxes to the city after the first couple of years as the brownfields burn off, then there is real economic benefit to the city even as the program moves forward in years 6 through 10. So over the course of time, we are, looking at it as a split between the two sides, that everybody's getting a benefit. So again, the proposed incentives, as Adrian mentioned, the model we came up with was actually a little bit less than the resolution that he put before you, and over the life of the incentive that we've requested, the annual incentive values out at about $388,000, but during that same period of time, we'll still be paying into the city $555,000. So again, it's kind of a win-win situation. There's still a significant increase in tax revenues coming into the city in addition to the incomes that are coming through with the new residents and the jobs and the sales taxes and things that this project will generate. But we were trying to look at it in a vacuum just from the grant standpoint, what's fair to the community and what's fair and needed for the project to be successful.
Okay. Anybody have any questions?
So what does the project look like with the grant, and what does it look like without the grant?
The project is a very difficult project, as you can imagine. Anytime you get into rehabilitation and restoration, you're starting with a vision and you're hoping you don't find too many surprises. And we found our share of surprises. We were in a design meeting today, as a matter of fact, where we were talking about the power lines behind the site where the Duke Power folks have told us they will not allow us to relocate their power lines. And we found out that based on the grades that we had created, we are going to be too close to their lines. And they're not going to move their lines. So now we're going to have to spend more dollars to lower the grades and move things around, change sizes of pipes so that the flows will still work. So there's a lot of complexity in the project. So it is a marginal project for us at this point, and so the grants are an important component to make sure that it meets the economic thresholds that are needed to move the project forward.
Sure.
Can I say something? I think that for me and my wife, we've been trying to develop the site for over 8 years. We found a partner, Mata Hoffer, that's willing to redevelop the site. We have not found a partner for the 8 years to do this. So, to answer your question, that's the option. The option is that we found a developer that's willing to take the risk, invest the money, renovate the building, but we need these incentives to make their return hurdles over a 10-year period. And so the combination of, this was a mill site that basically didn't pay real estate taxes. What you're doing with mill sites, the mills did not pay real estate taxes. You're adding this site to the tax rolls now. The mills paid their revenue through water and sewer bills. So that was the consumption tax. So the assessments on the mills are very low for the real estate. So what this finally does is add this property to the tax rolls.
Good.
And over a 10-year period, will add a substantial amount of revenue to the city. I saw this happen in my own hometown where we live next to the airport in Indianapolis. We developed a large industrial space just outside of Plainfield, Indiana. After 10 years now, the city is the beneficiary of a huge amount of tax revenue, but they did give incentives for developers to come in and take the risk to develop that real estate.
Yeah.
So this is where we're at.
So is this grant financially necessary for this project to move forward?
Yes.
So a grant that amounts to less than 1% of the total investment in this project and won't be paid out for 4 years and then only piecemeal. I'm not in commercial real estate, but can you explain that to me?
Sure. I'll give it a try in a few short comments. So the tax rebate that comes through in the performance grant process basically affects the net income on an annual basis, which in real estate terms, when you look at income on a project and return to investment, you're capping that value through what's called a cap rate. And so a few dollars in income, when it's put through a cap rate, creates a large value. So It doesn't sound like a lot getting, $50,000 a year in savings, but $50,000 a year moves the valuation of a project, it moves the return hurdle on a project on a cap rate basis a lot more than you would imagine.
So is the purpose of this grant to ensure some sort of minimum level of return for your investors?
It's to ensure that the project, at the end of the day, meets a return hurdle that makes it viable to do this type of project versus just knocking the building down. For example, we've run preliminary numbers. The mill itself, even though we've already got a building with masonry and steel and concrete and all that stuff, is costing us more to turn into multifamily than the freestanding building we're going to build behind it, if you can believe that. So that's the challenge, is you take a building that you've got standing there and you go, well, gee, that shouldn't be that much to fix that up. It's actually more expensive to fix that up than to start from ground zero with a bunch of new concrete and sticks and bricks.
So is the answer to my question yes?
Yes.
I mean, I don't know. I'm very uncomfortable funding a grant that's basically just going to subsidize returns for investors. Like, I don't know that that's, I didn't see that listed out in the resolutions for the program that we adopted, so I've got some real concerns about that.
To have an opportunity like this property's been sitting there for a long, long time. It's going to waste. It's not doing anything. Sometimes you have to spend money to make money. You have to give a little to get back. We're going to benefit in the long run from this. With everything we have.
Nobody's going to sit there for 50, 60 years paying.
It's common sense.
I mean, I get all that, but I'm looking at it as we've got 2 years of tax increases that we've asked our citizens to pay, and we're effectively giving a tax break to this project so that the Chronicle developers can make more money.
Well, but if you don't do the deal, you don't get any taxes.
That's right.
So if you have the opportunity to develop a piece of real estate that is historically significant to this community, that will bring in taxes, bring in jobs, has a multiplier effect across the whole community. Adaptive reuse, contaminated site, do I need to keep going?
Well, I think we need to look at a bigger picture here, because in theory or principle, I'm not a great proponent of incentives, but we look at the state of North Carolina and what they've lost to South Carolina, both with business and the film industry. So from that standpoint, I think we need to look at the broader, far-range, long-term.
But there are no jobs here. I mean, we're talking at best 20 jobs.
But we're talking an economic stimulus, we're talking about money coming in. If you looked at the $4.5 million of spending.
Yeah, I know. I study economics. You can talk about multiplier effects all day. It's
yes, sir, I do too.
You can make the numbers say whatever you want.
That's right. But what we're looking at is long-term goals.
So the new hospital that's been proposed for the county, where are those staff people going in? Right? And to get the generation of people that fill those staff-type jobs, this is the kind of community they want to live in.
Well, I mean, theoretically, I hate projections like that too. We don't know who's going to live there.
There's no. If they don't have any place to live, they won't live here.
Well, I'm not trying to be argumentative. I'm just saying, conjecture is conjecture.
Sure.
But let me ask you this, because during the conditional use hearing, I brought this up. You said that you had a contingency in place. And you also said that you understood it was an old building, and as you peeled layers off, you were going to find issues. And if you found more issues than anticipated, we would receive the building, which is pictured on the outside. But if more money was needed, you were going to take away from countertops, fixtures, and other things like that because of unforeseen consequences in the building itself.
Right.
So at that time, the grant was not in play, but you had a process to account for things that you may not be foreseen. But now you're saying this is a necessary component for unseen problems.
It's a necessary component for unseen problems based on the discussions we've been having for several months with staff. This is not a new concept in the bigger picture of discussions with staff and with discussions on how we're going to approach the project.
And I believe the interiors of these places are going to be set to attract young people to come into and live, use our downtown, drive our streets, walk our streets, I think it's going to be a benefit as far as the overall aspect of what we're doing here.
So the project doesn't move forward if you don't hit the number. So I assume you're taking this to Gaston County as well?
Yes, we're not.
So you need the city of Belmont and Gaston County to do it. What are your thoughts? Can I call Donnie? Am I allowed to do that? Can I ask you to speak? Sure. Great.
Excuse us, Mr. Martin. We're going to put this outside. Excuse us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
guys.
appreciate it.
Thanks for coming, guys.
Thanks for coming, guys.
Citizenship and community badge, you know.
Oh, you dropped something down there. Somebody left something. Yeah.
Probably fell asleep.
Okay, there's a pen. Hi, Donnie.
Sure. Could you just explain incentive programs, how they work with the county or municipalities?
Sure.
Now I feel.
So there are two ways that we typically incentivize a project. One is from the state. The state gets their money from sales tax and from personal income tax. So most of the incentive programs at the state level are paid by income and wages to people we recruit. The counties and the municipalities get paid off property tax. And so we focus ours on the property tax piece. There's no cross-subsidization of one taxpayer to another. So if you offer this to the company and they develop the property, Adrian's taxes are not going to subsidize them. The county's policy, and by extension the municipality's policy, is set up so that it's a reduction in net new revenue. It's not a loss in revenue. So if we have a large industrial company that expands, we require you to have $1 million of net new expansion. If you had depreciation of $10 million and you spend $1 million, you still don't get the grant. So that way we ensure that we get always net new revenue out of the project. We've used it to recruit a lot of companies. We've been doing it since 1996. We showed the commissioners what we paid. I think the last report we gave to them in 2017, or the previous 10 years, we paid out something like $3.8 million in grants and received $17 million.
And that's something.
So we're not giving anybody anything. We're co-investing to reduce risk of somebody coming here and trying to start up a facility, the risk of taking on a difficult project. We're trying to make it work for both sides. We're not giving them anything. Would it occur organically without this? I would tend to say not. Even when we do it with major companies, we'll have this argument. We did one of the largest grants we did was Owens Corning. That was started in 2016, and it took 3 years to commission the plant. So while it's sitting there commissioning all these products for their customers, 300 separate products, they're not making any money. But you have to do that to start it up. So we're co-investing to try to make it work to get what we want out of it. At the end of it, we're not giving this so that they can only make money. I hope they make money. We shouldn't be helping people that can't make money in the real estate business. And we're also doing something to get something we want out of it. And I think selfishly the EDC would like to see this happen so that we have different housing choices for people we recruit. There's a lot of people we bring to the county to work here, but they choose not to live here. And we have a lot of European companies that are coming, and I think this would be an attractive area, and this project specifically would be attractive to them. So we're trying to broaden the range of housing opportunities we have, and I think that's a plus for us and for Belmont.
Well, Donnie, you have more experience in this area than any of us sitting here. Is there anything that we're not asking or not thinking about that we should be?
No, I think there's considerations for risk. We want to make this performance-based. At the state, we have, because you're dealing with the income of employees, that's more variable than property tax. You know, the county's going to come get our money, and we're going to get your money on your behalf too. And we're in a position to do that. It's harder for the state to do that. So they have more clawback provisions in their incentive programs. Ours is, you're going to pay it that year. You're going to pay it one tax year. We're going to go back and make sure that everything you said you did. In this case, it's going to be easier. In an industrial setting, you have to make sure all the machinery equipment's there. Then in the next year, we'll actually get repaid. So we have your money, we have their money in the bank before we ever write them a check. Yeah. So the performance part of it is actually built into the process, because you're certainly not going to get money from us if you haven't paid your taxes, if you're not current. If you appeal your tax value to the State Real Estate Commission or to the county, it puts your grant on hold. You can't get a grant payment while it's under review. And so we have safeguards in there to make sure that we're not paying somebody money out that they shouldn't get.
Yeah. Thank you, Donnie. Any questions for Donnie?
What did you say the current tax rate was, or the current tax bill value?
The current tax bill, it's around $1,600.
That's all.
So we collected $16,000 over the last 10 years?
Yes. We had a revaluation, so we collected less than that. It was worth slightly less than that.
Can I ask a question? Weren't they supposed to have so many homeowners to sign off for them to be able to do that, and have they signed off yet?
Are you talking about the deed restriction?
Yes.
That doesn't have anything to do with the development, other than where we need an exemption for us to use 5 lots on the corner of the property. So if we can get 75% of the owners in the 5 plats that were part of the original, that we can develop the 5 lots that are deed restricted.
Have you got that yet?
No, we're working on it, so we're moving towards that. So most folks that we run into support us and want to get it done, so it's a benefit. So we're just working on it. It takes time.
All right, thank you, John.
Any other questions for me?
Well, I'm just going to share a couple of thoughts. The Chronicle had applied for, I guess, federal grants, historic property grants at one time. Is that correct?
No.
You didn't apply? I thought you had applied for some sort of...
We made an application to become a historic designation, and they wouldn't grant it to us.
Right.
Because of the...
Who's they?
What's happened over the 100 years of the project is that the property's been modified so many times that there was a group within the State Historic Society that didn't think it qualified. So when we applied for the designation, they wouldn't give it to us, and that was about 5 years ago. More recently, we went back and talked to some folks that there was a change in the organization. New people left, old people left, new people came in, and they said that it was historically significant, so we didn't apply for it. At this point, because the property's declining condition after 8 years of being open to the conditions, we were lucky to find a partner that's willing to develop it and take the risk of redeveloping it. So, no, we don't have any.
If I recall, not to cut across, but if I recall, the answer that was given back from the state or Park Service, whichever one, was take a bunch of the newer components off of the building, demo them, fix the water tower, and then we might consider putting it into the program. So it was do a bunch of work and then we'll think about it.
Okay, I guess I misunderstood, because I thought the last I heard is because the building had recently been materially altered by taking the windows out and some other things on that.
No.
And having dealt with the house on the historic register, everything is extremely restrictive. The house we have, if there had been any small amount of change, we would not have designation. I mean, it's amazing how restricted that is, as I said, even for a house.
Well, I guess the broader question I guess I was driving at, and what I was hoping, maybe to get into our recently adopted adaptive reuse is that, to what level, if the structure has been materially or substantially changed, what level do we still accept that as a historic property?
That's the job of the Gaston County Historic Preservation Group, and they've already designated it as historic.
Yes.
With the proposed changes, so it's already...
No, I understand that. I mean, I guess we would have some role in that decision or thought process just because we're writing grants.
In that particular instance, we have an agreement with Gaston County that the Gaston County Historic Preservation Commission oversees our local program. And so this property is received local historic landmark status from both the city through public hearing and action from the city council several years ago, and the Gaston County commissioners through similar action. And so any alteration to the property has to go through the certificate of appropriateness process through the Gaston County Historic Preservation process, and my understanding is...
We've done that. We showed them all our plans, and they approved them last year in November. Was when they were approved them.
So if you own a house on Main Street and it's a historic home, do you pay full tax value?
If you're a designated local historic landmark through the city council and Gaston County Commissioners, you get a 50% reduction in your property taxes.
And you might have to wait 20 years for it to happen, which we did. So it's not necessarily a done deal.
I think if we want historic buildings to remain, we need to provide historic incentives.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, that's my view, and this doesn't appear to cost us any money. In fact, we'll make more money in a year if it's developed than we've earned over the last decade on it. And so, like, the net new revenue is money that would otherwise not exist, and that money we could put in our budget and come up with priorities, whether it be parks or infrastructure improvements around the county, and we can let this project help us pay for those improvements. I also think the $100,000, and I mean, we struggle, and I know it's very not popular in the community, but we've struggled with water infrastructure and water rates forever. We had a few mills that subsidized all the residents. We really need water users. That's how utilities function, is the more users you have, the less it costs. I think there's a pretty strong benefit. That's a significant amount of money for one, whatever, 5, 7 acre parcel. But those are my views.
Having been involved with it for 8 years, I'll make a motion that we approve.
We're still on
I'm sorry. I'll make a motion for now, public hearing then.
Do I hear a
I'd like to
second?
hear what everybody else has to say, too.
Do I hear a second?
Well, can we say that in public hearing, or do we?
Just come out of public hearing.
Let's come out of public hearing. I'll second, as long as, you know, I'll second the motion.
Come out of public hearing. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, let's move on to considering the approval of a resolution providing the City of Belmont Historic Mill Adaptive Reuse Incentive Grant to the Chronicle Mill Redevelopment Project.
Okay, well, obviously, I'm in favor of it, so I'll discuss for a minute. I've been one of the people who has been involved for 8 years, and we have been making every effort to work with the owner and any developer who came through, who was trying to provide what we considered an attractive situation, something that would be of value to the community, and also have something aesthetically pleasing. So to me, we've done the best we can do. The developer and the owner have as well. So I see no problem with it my own self. That's my opinion.
All right, give it a motion. Do I have a second?
Do you have anything you want to add?
I mean, I would agree with what, most of what Martha and Ryan have said. I kind of approach it from Martha's standpoint that when it comes to incentives, I'm not, a huge fan, but I also think that when you look at this proposal and, when you look at it long-term, that we've, and what they've actually proposed, which doesn't kick in for 4 years, and they're asking for less than what they would otherwise get under the policy that we've just adopted. So I think, I don't think there's overreaching here. I think the long-term benefit, as Ryan said, this is more, we're not taking anything from anyone. This is all extra additional revenue. And I do like the fact that we've talked a lot about infrastructure, and I think it would be great to get that extra revenue and to have the increased use of our infrastructure, which has not been used since the mill has not been in operation.
Well, you're seconding it.
Well, I'll go back. I probably need to officially make the motion to approve the incentives request from the Chronicle.
Unless there's anyone else that wants to.
Well, I'm not a big fan of incentives, but I also don't want to see our mills disappear. But, frankly, whether it's material or not, I'm a little uncomfortable with us out of the gate applying this to a building that's been so altered, historic property. I'm a little uncomfortable with the language. I'm a little uncomfortable we adopted it if there's a statutory question that can't be resolved. And that's kind of where I'm sitting at the moment.
Anybody else?
Well, I mean, my views are well known, but it seems like the purpose of this grant is just to underwrite a certain level of return for this investment group, which, in my opinion, is not a proper use of public funds.
I will, just one other thing. since this proposal does not really track with what was, in, the general guidelines of the policy, and we've talked about how there could be an ad hoc basis in which this could be done, were we to move to approve this and I were to vote in favor, I would vote in favor of it independent of the policy that was just passed. I would vote for it on its own merits, regardless of whether the policy was enforced or not.
So you're saying don't apply the policy, just vote it?
Well, I'm just saying that
and I'm a little bit confused.
Yeah, well, I just,
doesn't follow. So they're asking for less money than they would otherwise be eligible for under the policy. But this is for the adaptive reuse of a historic mill. This particular mill is almost 120 years old. It's part of Belmont's community character. It offers choice in housing, shopping, and employment. These are goals of the comp plan that was unanimously approved by the city council. This is over 50 years old. It's got a net new tax revenue increase every year. I mean, I feel like it does comply with the intent of the newly adopted grant program. They're just asking for less money than they could have.
But, yeah, all right, that's fine.
Again, do I have a motion to come out of public hearing?
Oh, no, you have a
I'm sorry, I mean,
You need a second from somebody.
I need a second.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No. I'm opposed.
Okay. 3-2. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you all. Next item we have on the agenda is item number 5, doing a public hearing on economic development incentives and a development agreement for the River West Business Park. Do I have a motion to go into public hearing?
Motion to go into public hearing.
Got a motion?
Second.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, we are in public hearing.
Thank you, Mayor. I will provide just an overview of this request, and then the developer and his team are here and can certainly speak to the specifics of it and to the background and the need of this request. So this has nothing to do with historic preservation. So this is a request for the existing 2006 industrial property tax grant incentive program that the City Council has had for a level 2 tax grant, which is for projects that are between $15 and I believe $30 million in net new tax base increase, which is the level 2 part. The level 2 tax grant is a 9-year tax grant where the developer provides the initial investment into the property, whether through the buildings or machinery, and then once the tax office assesses it, the developer or the property owner pays 100% of the taxes to the city and the county. And then in the first year that the grant is effective, the city would pay 90% of that back. In the second year would pay 80% of that back. And the third year pay 70% back, on down until the 9 years are resolved. And after that 9th year, the city gets to keep 100% of the property taxes generated by the project. Just like the Chronicle mill, we won't know the actual value of this development until the development is completed and Gaston County Tax Office has assessed the value for it. But assuming that value is somewhere between $15 and $30 million, and based on the per square footage value that the developer provided to me, we estimate that this level 2 tax incentive grant would would have a value of $472,369 over 9 years. So that's not each year, that's total over 9 years. Over that same 9-year time period, the city would still collect $497,089. So we would collect more than we would pay out in the terms of the grant. And then after the grant has expired, after those 9 years, based on projected valuations, the city would receive $135,184 annually in property taxes for as long as the property stands. To put that in comparison, based on the current valuation of the property, We're currently receiving $5,620.56 in annual property taxes. So that is the Level 2 tax grant is something the city has had since 2006. Gaston County also offers that. In addition to the tax grant, this development is requesting some infrastructure reimbursement. As you know, typically and historically with these projects, the city has not required off-site infrastructure improvements. So for the U.S. Cotton Parkdale property, we did not require off-site traffic improvements or off-site utility improvements. This is the first project of an economic development project that we have required off-site improvements. And as part of the discussion between the development team and the city staff, and then my discussions with the city council, there are a couple of off-site improvements going to be made to the Woodland Street corridor. Gaston County is helping with the improvements to the intersection of Woodlawn and Hickory Grove Road. The state is helping with the improvements to the intersection of Woodlawn and Belmont Mount Holly Road as part of the I-85 widening project. The city, as part of this development agreement, would help with the cost of the intersection improvements to the intersection of Woodlawn and Acme Road, which frankly is a safety issue as it stands now and needs to be done separate whether this project happens or not. It should be on the list. Now, that's the intersection of two state roads. DOT is aware of the site distance issue of the curve and of the slope of the private property, but that is an intersection improvement that needs to be made. This project is the vehicle by which we're going to get that intersection improvement. But the developer has asked for financial assistance from the city to make that happen. Also, Cason Street is going to be relocated and a new sidewalk built along Woodlawn Street. In addition to that, the water lines along Cason Street are going to be relocated and new water lines installed. So at the November 22nd special city council meeting, the council directed me to negotiate an economic incentive program for the River West Business Park. I wanted to make sure that we were consistent with our existing incentive policy, that Level 2 tax grant policy. The developer initially requested a similar tax grant, but with different terms, and I wanted to make sure that we use our existing adopted policy and not deviate from that adopted policy from 2006. So that's why that's part of that. But also to help make these off-site infrastructure improvements that will benefit the public in addition to the private development. I'm recommending that the city reimburse the developer for the cost of the street and sidewalk improvements at a rate of $96,400 per year for 5 years, for a total of $482,000 over that 5-year period. And then the cost of the utility upgrades is $37,990 per year over 5 years, for a total of $189,950 over that 5 years. By stretching those payments out over 5 years, that helps us with our 5-year budget. So it's not, we couldn't afford that kind of hit in 1 year or even 2 years. But stretching it over 5 years, it's better terms for the city. The advantage of doing it this way is that the developer will make those infrastructure improvements. And only upon completion of those improvements does the developer get reimbursed. So there's no risk to the city that we provide money to the developer and he goes away.
Why would they pay for it up front and then we reimburse them on like our road improvements instead of us just hiring a contractor and going and paying for it?
It'll work out to our advantage to do it this way financially.
Adrian, these road improvements, what, if any, are required by our TIA?
All of them.
So we put a TIA in place to have the developer pay for road improvements, which can impact traffic because of the development. So now, are we being asked to pay for our own TIA?
So you agreed to pay for a portion of the TIA itself for the study. So now we've done the TIA, it's identified improvements to that corridor that need to be made in order to mitigate the traffic generated by this project. And so, again, this is the first time that we've required off-site infrastructure improvements for a project like this. So This is more than what the developer can take on by himself, so he's asked for help from the city, the county, and the state. The county and the state have stepped up and agreed to help pay for it because they see the benefit in the infrastructure improvements and for having this project. So I'm recommending that we do the same.
Well, let me ask you one other question. I mean, part of what we're paying for here is a sidewalk. Is this the sidewalk along Woodland?
Yes, sir.
This is the sidewalk that was supposed to be 8 feet, and they asked us to reduce to 5 feet?
The city council unanimously approved a 5-foot sidewalk, yes, sir.
Based on a request from the developer?
Yes, sir. That's part of the conditional rezoning.
Okay, so our TIA, or whatever, I guess it was involved TIA, or our ordinance says that we require an 8-foot sidewalk. They requested that we reduce it to 5 feet, which we did, which I was uncomfortable with because of the speeds, and now we're being asked to pay for the reduced sidewalk.
For a portion of it, yes, sir, to split the cost with the developer.
I understand this is the first application of this TIA, but, you know, TIA is designed, whether it's residential or commercial, to mitigate the impact of development, one way or the other. I mean, you 6 of one, half dozen of the other, you still end up with X amount of cars on the road, congesting the roads. So, I'm just a little uncomfortable being asked to pay for a policy that's put in place to achieve something at no cost to the city, but in this case is generating a lot of cost. That's just my thoughts.
How much of the TIA are they paying for? How much, like, are we covering the entire TIA? Is there any?
So let me ask you what you mean by TIA. Do you mean the actual analysis in the study?
Well, the requirements that were identified as part of the study that need to be done as part of the conditional
So
rezoning.
the TIA is the actual analysis that Kinley Horn did.
Right.
So we split the cost 50-50 with the developer. City
Which
council
we've
approved
never
that,
done before.
Which we've never done before. So we said, and this was a year and a half, 2 years ago, we came to the city council and said we have an economic development project because the TIA ordinance up to that point had only been applied to residential projects. But the ordinance says it's for every project because, as Councilman Turner says, a car on the street's a car on the street, whether it's going to work or going home. So city council says yes, the ordinance says you have to do a TIA for this project, but because it's an economic development project on a site identified for economic development in an area of town that we've said we need to have more private development and infrastructure improvements, we're willing to partner with the cost of the TIA. So we did that. Kinley Horn presented the results of the TIA at the rezoning hearing back in November. So they identified some improvements to the Woodlawn corridor, such as turn lanes, acceleration, deceleration lanes, which the developer is paying for, but it also identified off-site improvements that needed to be made to mitigate the impact of this project. So without the project, you don't need to have these improvements. So the easy thing, if we don't want the infrastructure improvements, is we don't need this project. But by having the project and by reaching out to our partners at the county level and state level, we're going to get these off-site, and with the private developers, we're going to get infrastructure improvements to the existing Woodlawn Street corridor, all the way from Belmont and Abbey College to the 4 Points intersection at Hickory Grove Road. The city is going to, if you approve this, the city would pay for one portion of that.
Adrian, the TIA cost, I may not remember correctly, did they not go up exponentially because it wasn't just the TIA? Because of the nature of the project and the impact on surrounding arteries, was not the county's TIA or something similar, was that not activated because of the impact to larger arteries?
I don't know.
No?
No.
Okay.
It's the city's TIA because it's the
I
city's
understand,
own
but
ordinance.
I thought there were broader requirements because of the nature of it, and it was going to impact, intersections farther out than would normally be incorporated in our TIA.
So our TIA ordinance says that you look at intersections within a mile of the development site. So we've applied that.
Okay.
So I believe I heard you say at the beginning of your presentation that the intersection of Acme and Woodlawn it's a safety issue, and so are you saying that even if nothing happened on that site, we'd need to fix that intersection?
I would say that the intersection needs to be fixed, whether we do it or we ask NCDOT, because it's an intersection of two state roads, which we don't typically spend city money on.
Is that something we're currently planning on paying for in like our CIP?
No.
No. No.
That is not on our CIP list.
What is the impact to our CIP if we decide to to fund this? Like, do any projects get bumped because we're paying for these instead?
No, sir, this would come out of our economic development fund or line item, and we have some projects that we've committed economic development funding now that roll off, so the funding would be available. So this, if you approve this, number one, the level 2 tax grant is not money competing for something else because it's money that doesn't exist for and not for this project. So that's money coming into the city and going back out. And then these infrastructure improvements, because we can fund them over 5 years, then it doesn't come at the cost of other projects.
And my understanding, Adrian, excuse me, is that we're going to have a potential of 250 jobs with this project.
Yes, sir.
I think what's interesting is that the state and the county, for the first time, and as long as I can remember, are actually going to fix something in Belmont. And, I mean, so we put in $472,000 to fix an intersection and build a sidewalk, and then the county steps in and puts in how much? A couple, 300,000, 400,000, 500,000, and then the state does this. That's probably even more if it's up here off of 85. So for me, I understand that, you know, if there's another project that we want to do, great, we can go fix another intersection with the $400,000, but we're not going to get the state and the counny level and then be able to kind of finance it over 5 years and raise our tax base. So I think we're getting a really high return on investment on infrastructure improvements that otherwise we'd be trying to pay out on our own at some point in the future, whether it's this year or next year, it'll be further down the line. But so I think it's a pretty high return on investment if we're trying to get state and county money investing in Belmont, which we're failing at on transportation issues. So this would be a win.
Well, I mean, the flip side is, you know, you could set a precedent here to everybody who we apply the TIA to is going to come to us for some kind of apportioned rebate on the TIA. And one of my concerns is that's not what it was designed for. It was not designed to cost us anything.
Yeah, I'm kind of concerned about what seems to be the lack of a limiting principle here. So if like somebody goes down on the peninsula and decides to build something and then decides that they only want to pay for half the TIA, if we say yes to this, how do we say no to something like that?
You say that it's not in the public interest and you say no to it.
Sure.
So
we have on one thing doesn't mean we have to stay with that. There's no such thing as like a precedent law that we have to follow.
Yeah, I mean, that's true, but at the same time, I think consistency in public policy also helps.
So this was an economic development project that was non-residential, and the city council has been pretty vocal wanting new non-residential tax base and wanting infrastructure improvements in North Belmont and wanting new development in North Belmont. So we have a project that accomplishes the city's goals, and they've asked for some city help to further accomplish those goals. If this were for a new housing project on the South Point Peninsula, first off, I don't think the council would have paid for the TIA, and I don't think you would pay for the improvements. But this is not a residential development on the peninsula.
And Donnie, if I'm not mistaken, there was a chemical company that was going to come in there, right?
We have plastics operations.
Yeah. So this is going to be a lot more beneficial.
I think what the problem we had with the site was there was some contamination, so we have to find a developer that's willing to take that project on to do it. Not only the risk, you can mitigate some of the risk through the federal program, but you're also asking somebody to type a lot of money for a substantial portion of time. And the beautiful part of it is that they're willing to take the risk on building this spec. And I can tell you, no matter how good a job you do, that's still a lot of money and still a lot of risk to assume we're going to work hard to help them.
Sure it is.
That's a lot of risk. And you're going to put a lot of equity of their own money into that to make that work.
But that'd be a game changer for the whole North Belmont corridor.
Absolutely. And it will make it a location where we can apply, like I said before, all the existing county programs and our activities within CPED, and also the Alliance to bring projects to Belmont. We can't do right now because there's no space.
Yeah. Thank you, Donnie.
Now, I understand the concern about spending city money on helping with infrastructure improvements for development. You know, we could take the tack that that's not in the city's best interest and we don't do it. And then that way when developers come to me and say, we want to develop this property, we need your help, I can let them know that we're not interested in helping. But I think that's only going to result in these, currently the vacant Acme Mill site remaining vacant, the Chronicle Mill site remaining as it is, and other projects that we want done, but we're not willing to help, aren't going to get done.
Adrian, let me just ask you a question, just, and this is just theoretical. When we expand South Point Road, when that project moves forward at some point, the city is going to be on the hook for the utility relocation. DOT has told us that we will be responsible for millions of dollars in relocating those water lines. Will there be any rebate from the state to us if we do that?
Yes.
There will
So
be.
we are only responsible for 25% of that cost.
Okay.
So we would perform that work or have that work performed, and then the state would reimburse 75% of that cost. So we only, because of the size of the city, we are only responsible for 25% of the net cost of that.
All right, well, let me ask a second follow-up question. For utility relocation like this, for any industrial project, have we ever agreed to relocate utilities? And I guess by utilities, you're strictly talking water and sewer lines.
Yes, sir.
Have we done that before?
Not to my knowledge.
We have not.
All right. Anybody else? We have a motion to go out of public hearing?
I'll make a motion to go out.
The applicant is here if you want to hear
Oh,
from
you
the
got to speak,
applicant.
Rob? You guys go, okay.
You don't have to, but if you have questions.
That's fine.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Glad to be back. I'm Rob Presley. I represent the development entity that's working on this project and has been negotiating with the city for the development agreement. I'm going to keep my comments short and sweet and also be available to answer any questions you might have. I want to start with, though, I've watched social media over the last 24, 36 hours, and it's amazing to me how much misinformation there is out in the public and the community. This developer is not asking for the city to reach into its coffers and subsidize its project at all. What the city's asking for is for a partial rebate of some of the taxes that will be new taxes that will be generated by this project that currently don't exist today. The city's collecting about $5,500 a year right now. Over the next 16 years, that totals up to be about $95,000. Were this project to be developed, it would generate about $1.6 million in property taxes over the next 16 years.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. And so what they're asking for is some of that back out into the future, the first payment not occurring for at least 7 years from now, to help fund public infrastructure cost for the area of North Belmont. I hope if nothing else occurs today or tonight, that the public begins to understand that by approving this incentive program, which was adopted by this council in 2006, does not mean that a park can't get built, or a tennis court can't get built, or an intersection can't get completed. That is so false. So, with that said, the reason for the request is very easy. 24 months ago when this started, and I got the developer to come to Belmont and consider doing a project that we as a community, me back on planning zoning board days, wanted to have in North Belmont. They came, but we identified early on infrastructure, lack of good infrastructure was going to be a problem. And that from the beginning has been something that has been worked on every day since. The problem is no substantial city money has gone into the North Belmont infrastructure in decades. So it's old, it's tired, it's somewhat functionally obsolescent in certain places. You have aging utilities, you have roads that will not handle any new development at all. So if we as a community want new development in this area of town, we've got to make an investment. The good news here is we have a developer that's willing to make that investment up front and get reimbursed out into the future over a very favorable payment period coming from new taxes generated by the development that they are developing. And I hope that everybody understands that. This is not to juice their return on investment, this is to make the project fly. So the size and scope of the infrastructure work that needs to occur in North Belmont is much bigger than a project. It's actually much bigger than several projects. But the good news is if we can get this first wave of infrastructure work done, funded and completed, that it'll be the catalyst for the next project and the one after that. And each development group that comes along afterwards won't need as much assistance from the city as the first one in. And so Belmont, it was unfair, and nor could Belmont afford to do all of the infrastructure work, even through favorable future income streams of new taxes. So it was going to take a group effort of public and private sector to be able to fund the cost of the improvements that need to be done. And it's for that reason we went to and lobbied the state and won the state's approval to add Belmont Mount Holly and Woodlawn Road intersection to their 85 project. That is a huge deal. Somebody said it earlier, I don't know the last time the state came to town and is going to write millions and millions of dollars to fund an intersection improvement, but we were able to get it done. And in part because of what this project brings to this community and to Gaston County. We've gone to the county. We've had the same discussions. The county has said, under Tracy Philbeck's leadership, we're in. Tell us what we need to do. And it starts with Hickory Grove Woodlawn Road. And we were headed down the path of getting a check from the county to do that road, and we realized we were probably still going to come up short, so the better thing to do would be to apply for, and that's in the process we're in now, the county's economic development program that Belmont used, that mirrored their program off of. That will be where the money comes from, not only for Hickory Grove, but also to help with the other infrastructure needs. And so between the developer's check, the state's check, the county's check, we're almost there. And the thing that will get us over the finish line is Belmont's contribution. And so Adrian did a good job of outlining what that request is. And again, it's to participate in the program that was adopted under Mayor Boyce's leadership in 2006. And Acme Road and the utility work that we're discussing, that really came as a result of, we went to the city, to Adrian and his team early on and said, look, we need you guys to do Acme Road. It's a mess. The neighborhood says it's a mess. It's a dangerous intersection. Can you do that work? We'll consider it. Utilities. You got utilities that are, we don't even know what all's in there. I think we've kind of identified what's in there, but these are utilities of water sewer lines that actually not only work for this project, but the neighborhood and surrounding area behind it. They need to be dealt with. Can you do that? We'll consider it. So ultimately, after a whole bunch of back and forth over months, what we agreed to do is Belmont would consider funding a hunk of that work over a payment plan period out into the future, allowing for the money for utilities to come out of the utility fund, the money for the roads coming out of economic development fund, and then the rebalance of the money that we're looking for to help get the infrastructure complete from the 2006 adopted incentive program. So I feel like that everyone has jumped on board here to help get us past this. And as a net result, what I have calculated up is, based on numbers that the city manager's office and the developer all have agreed to, is the city, over 16 years, the city's economic development grant will give $472,369 to the developer over a 9-year period. Even after that money is given to the developer to reimburse them for infrastructure work, over 16 years, the city will still net $859,000 of property taxes. If you do nothing and the project does not get off the ground and it does not occur, you'll collect $95,000 over the next 16 years.
Yeah.
So what a windfall. You're getting a tremendous amount of new tax revenue that didn't exist. You're getting a project that is bringing potentially 250, that's an estimate, of jobs to North Belmont. And then on top of all that, you're getting 2 intersections improved. You're getting improvements to Woodlawn Road that will set the pace for the next development to come. You're getting utility upgrades, you're getting Acme realigned, and you're getting Caisson rebuilt and straightened out. That's a lot for an investment that's favorably laid out over a 16-year period. So for that reason, I hope that this is an easy decision on your part. The last thing I'll say is this. I was involved and around when the TIA which is traffic impact analysis, which in itself is a study. It's a study. It's not a directive for what a developer is going to pay. It's a study to say that if you do this development, here is what we estimate the impact to be on our local roads.
Yeah.
And it's from that point, having that information, that the city is in a position to be able to work with the developer to determine how do we mitigate that traffic problem. And in our case, the TIA served us well. It said, this is the thing, these are the things that will occur if this project's built. And so we were able to mitigate it by going to the state DOT and getting them to do the Belmont Mount Holly Road intersection, going to the county and saying, we need help at Hickory Grove intersection, and the developer including certain improvements in their own budget. And so now, through the tax incentive program, paired with some help over a 5-year period from the city, we're going to finish this off and we're going to make all these improvements, which are substantial and too big for one project to carry. So that's why we're here. I hope in the future the TIA continues to be a process with the city. The state did not direct us to do a TIA. This project didn't warrant a state TIA. It was Belmont's ordinance that warranted the TIA. We got the information we needed out of the TIA, which helped the city and the developer to make good decisions about the design of the project. And now we're getting them funded.
I voted for that back in '06 too, but I thought it was a good project.
Exceptional.
Yeah.
Exceptional. We don't in the state of North Carolina have TIF, which South Carolina has benefited from greatly. And basically TIF financing is the municipality takes out a bond over a long period of time and funds the helps the developer fund off-site improvements and then gets repaid through new tax revenue. The city and the county have a program different than TIF because we don't in North Carolina have a good opportunity for TIF, and it's a very similar method. You pay it for it today, we'll reimburse you some of the money from new taxes you're going to generate years from now. I think it's a good program, and I hope it's one that y'all continue to use, particularly when it's a project that brings so much infrastructure improvement and new jobs to the community in a place we need them.
Thank you, Rob.
Sure.
Anybody have any other questions? Anybody would like to speak?
Well, I have some questions, I don't know. Just about the proposed development agreement, and I don't know, Parks might be the better person to answer this. You know, I noticed in the first couple of sections, it talks about the submission of plans and budgets, and for the city to approve, and approval will not be unreasonably withheld. And then it talks about what happens if we don't respond in X number of days. But it seemed to me that there's no real provision regarding what would happen if we were to disapprove the proposed plans. So I just didn't know if that was something that could be addressed in the agreement, because, you know, supposedly that could happen. I also thought I was noticing that in a number of sections such as 1, 5, 14, 15, and 23, there's reference to days. Something will happen within 15 days, something will happen within 10 days, but in section 2, you use business days. So I just didn't know whether that was intentional or we need to be consistent in our use of terminology. There are some spelling and grammatical errors I'll give Parks to clean up. And then I noticed there was a number of boilerplate provisions, but no dispute resolution or form selection clause, and that's somewhat typical, so I didn't know if that was something that we might want to include in the agreement.
Let me add an observation. In the language that he's citing, it also, you know, it cites days, and it says, you know, developer shall send a second written notice to city requesting their response. The city fails to respond within 15 days from the receipt of such second notice, the plan shall be deemed approved. Additional work, same thing. I think that the plans shall be deemed approved. Budget deemed approved. Now, I don't know if that's usual and customary, but that bothers me because we've got a small planning and zoning department with a heavy workload, And for whatever reason, whether it's slip somebody's mind, or we have people sick, or some other issue, the plans will be deemed approved.
Well, I think, I think the idea behind it is fairly typical in contracts in that, you know, they're trying to protect themselves so that we don't just string them along and, you know, basically deny it by not doing anything. I mean, we can talk about whether we want to increase that time period. I mean, I think that that's something that could be negotiated, but that's sort of the intent behind it, is to, it's sort of a safeguard against basically, you know, not necessarily expressly disapproving something, but disapproving it by not acting on it. And so that's why that provision would be in there, unless...
I had given comments early on that those dates might need to be extended.
So I'm certainly, I mean, that could be negotiated.
I'm not sure where that conversation went to.
Yeah, but that's the point, the purpose behind it.
Just going back to the TIA, the state, this did not generate enough trips for the state's TIA to be enacted, but because of our ordinance, it did. Okay, so, you know, again, getting back to this, I'm still struggling with, our ordinance triggered the study. Every other developer, as far as I know, has paid, when they wanted to move forward with their project, they have paid for what has been defined as needed upgrades to intersections, roads, whatever, just part parcel of doing business. TIA says you have to do this, then you're going to have to do it on your dime to move forward. We've actually had someone on Henry Chapel Road, I think, back out of the TIA because it was cost prohibitive, because it showed they were going to have to widen South Point Road in some areas. So, I mean, you could say there's some understanding there of how the TIA works. You know, you are responsible to mitigate the additional pressure on the roads or the intersection that this development is creating. And I'm really uncomfortable with us, I was going to say in a roundabout way, but this is a direct way, we're going to be paying for these infrastructure improvements. And I don't know that it would happen, but since we have held everybody else to this standard, are we going to have people come back and request some kind of rebate on their project because we've allowed it in this case?
I don't think so.
Have we had another business development subject to the TIA?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so this is the first of those.
I thought the difference was that this was an economic development, industrial project.
Absolutely.
And the other ones are residential.
Right.
And that was the reason why we unanimously voted to split the cost of the TIA up front.
Right.
Yeah.
It was, this project was special because, I mean, quite frankly, there's way more benefit to this, to the community, than a residential project at this point where we're at. Provides jobs, higher tax base, diversifies the tax, and we get other money. Yeah. I think we should move forward with it. If not, I'm sure there's other towns in Gaston County that would love to get this money from Gaston County. I'm sure there's other counties that would love to get this money from the state. So I think we'd be wise, when the money's on the table from these other government agencies. I mean, I know John Torbert's office has been working on this, and Tracy Philbeck's office. I mean, the money is there. Let's bring it to our town. I mean, maybe there's something we can learn from this, since we haven't received any other money for road improvements in the last at least 6 years since I've been here. So, to the best of my knowledge, but so this is a good time to get that county money here. It's a good time to get that state money here. We're going to end up paying a third. I mean, it's all going to change, but we're going to pay a third for. It's a great return on investment for infrastructure that we know we're going to need up there. So I don't think if we don't do the infrastructure, I mean, you're basically going to ask a developer to come in and pay for it all on their own, which is just never going to be feasible. I mean, you're talking about exits off of 85. I mean, that just doesn't happen.
And you'll end up doing it later on down the road.
Somebody's going to have to do it in the future, and it's going to be us.
I do, I mean, I understand where Richard's coming from, and I think, you know, to some extent, I share his thoughts on that. And that when we received this draft development agreement, I did look at it pretty carefully. You know, if you look at definitions, if you look at sections 3 and 4, I looked at that pretty carefully in terms of what's defined as work for which the city is going to be reimbursing the developer versus what's additional work for which the developer is going to be solely responsible. Because based on my understanding of what was discussed during the special meeting, there were certain intersections, certain aspects that would eventually need to be fixed as public safety concerns, regardless of what went on the property, whether this development went forward or not. And there were other things that I felt were more required by the TIA and a result of this specific development. And I wanted to make sure that we weren't doing as Richard said, basically paying for the TIA in the back end, and looking at the way the work versus additional work was defined, that it was bucketed about as I would have done it. And so that sort of allayed those concerns. I think we could debate about the sidewalk. I'd be open to discussion on that, but at the same time, based on all the benefits that we've discussed are going to result from this project and this agreement, at the end of the day, I'm not sure I want to scuttle that for a section of sidewalk. But I think what Richard is saying, to some, I agree to a certain extent, but I think what we're being asked to pay for goes more along the lines of things we were going to have to do anyway one day, as opposed to what they will be, the developer will be solely responsible for as additional work, and I felt more comfortable based on those definitions, but I definitely think Richard's concerns were legitimate.
I share Richard's concerns about the TIA. I'm kind of concerned that we may be unintentionally opening the floodgates here. It's very easy to justify everything under the sun in the name of economic development. So, eventually you got to draw the line somewhere, and I feel like our TIA is doing what it's supposed to do, and I think we should stand behind it. I don't want to see us get into this arms race with other cities over, who's going to fund the most upgrades and whatnot. I think that's something that we cannot afford to do. So I'm very uncomfortable with this.
So, so do we respond to the county and the state and tell them that we're not interested in their funding? Is that how we're going to move this? These
are state roads, and we do have a process for getting upgrades made to state roads.
And we've had 0 in the last 6 years.
Good luck.
We have projects, we have projects approved and funded in the pipeline, but from the time that they go through the spot process, the public input, local points assigned, being approved, you're looking at a 6, maybe 10-year time horizon on a lot of these projects. So yes, we have, and last year we did very well in getting projects, not just Gaston County, but Belmont. So we have had forward movement, but it is going to take some time to get these things going. It's not like MPO says, okay, we approve it, and you're talking weeks that we have the money and you see dirt start to be moved. There's a little more of a process.
Maybe this is the ticket, is having private industrial development, because they got the state and they got the county and they did it in less than 2 years.
Absolutely.
And they got the money committed without the MPO approval process.
Well, see, I want to question, how did they do that? Why did these intersections not have to go through any kind of ranking process, particularly the states? This never came before the MPO. We never reviewed it, talked about it.
Had this gone through the MPO, it would not have scored well enough. One of the candidate projects we talked about at the Transportation Committee last week was improvements to the Woodland corridor. We submitted that to the MPO. It didn't score well enough. It's not going to get funded. It's not going to get done. So we looked at this. We met and with representatives from the state as well as the county and the city and the private development team, and identified these locations for improvements. And because there was an existing 85 widening project, that the project boundary was just south of the intersection of Woodlawn and Belmont and Holly Road, DOT said, yes, we need to include that intersection. So now that's part of that funded project. the county was not going to make improvements to the infrastructure, the road infrastructure that's outside the city limits out in the county. But they said this project is worth investing in North Belmont, in an area that needs investment. Part of the problem with North Belmont and the way it's situated is because part of it's in the city, part of it's in the county, and it just falls through the cracks in a lot of areas. This is an area to address some of that. So it's a good partnership. So the normal process is the MPO and the spot office for these big transportation projects, but we were able to get NCDOT to agree. We just happened to be lucky enough that the development team wanted to develop in a piece of property that was close enough to I-85 that we were able to get DOT to expand the scope of that project. So, I understand the concern about economic development and incentives, and I don't like it, and it's not always been fun negotiating incentive agreements, and we don't always agree with things, and sometimes we say bad words to each other. But that's, if we're going to have economic development projects done, this is how you do them. And, or we could just say, we don't like them, we're not going to do them. We can ask for the state to solve our transportation problems, but, we heard last Thursday that even of all the transportation problems that we have, it's going to be 10 or 15 years before they solve very small ones, and it's only a few of them. So this is a good opportunity to address projects that we need to do that don't meet the requirements for the spot office, that get done in a lot quicker manner than what we would normally go through with the MPO. And by the way, it comes with a $15 or $16, $18 million private development that's going to create a couple hundred jobs. So to me, it's a pretty good deal.
It is a good deal.
Let me ask you a question. Through the TIA process, these roads, the improvements that are being proposed, if the intersection is performing at a D, it's only going to be brought back up to a D. Okay, so the increased traffic, while you say we're getting the road improvements, we have a D now, we're going to continue to have a D. So while we are getting expanded roads, time savings and transit times will remain more or less the same, more or less.
That's the whole point of the TIA.
Yeah, I understand that. So when you say we're gaining all of this, we're gaining a lot to accommodate the inflated
Or we
traffic.
can say no to this and get none of it, and have no.
But regardless of whether, let's take, just so I'm clear, the intersection of Acme and Woodlawn, regardless of whether that's a D before or after the improvements, at a minimum, by realigning it, we're making it the sight lines safer, because that was my understanding at the special meeting, and even when it was before planning and zoning, was that that's dangerous, that you can't, based on what you can see. So regardless of the traffic flow, I think by realigning the street, that's going to be a benefit in terms of safety. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I mean, the county's been just pouring money into Gastonia and Bessemer City and building these industrial parks. They're incentivizing these companies to move here. They're coming up with land agreements. They're giving them land. And we've complained about it here for 30 years. And now the county wants to seriously invest money in North Belmont that could actually spur an industrial park. And the developer's going to do it all without any tenants, pure speculative play. And we're going to go from $94,000 to $900,000 over the next, what would you say, 16 years. I don't see what the opposition is. I know we can talk about the TIA and opening doors, but we're elected here to take these cases on one by one and vote on them and move on. I mean, if we just want to have a policy, we don't have to exist. We can just enforce the policies 100% of the time and do it at a staff level, and we don't hear any cases anymore. We can do that for planning and zoning cases, we can do that all. What our body's tasked to do is when there's something unique that comes out of our policy, that's when we dive into it and address it, and that's where we're at here. I'm excited about this project. I think North Belmont deserves the funding up there.
Me too.
I think the intersections need to be improved by us or somebody, and this gets it done. It's exciting to see Gaston County want to invest in Belmont. It's exciting to see the state want to invest in Belmont. I don't see how we can sit here in good faith and say this and vote against it and call ourselves fiscally responsible. I think this is the most fiscally responsible thing we can do as a community, is set ourselves up for good long-term financial sense. And we don't like the incentives games, well, that's the game. So we can either try and play the game, we can quit the game, or we can run for office and change the game. You're not going to change it at City Hall.
Well, I mean, and well said. I still appreciate Richard's concerns, I appreciate Mark's concerns. No one does want to, when he said, Mark, no one wants to get in an arms race, as many things do, it made me analogize to college football, there's talk of arms races in college football, and everyone's spending more money in all these facilities and everything, and everyone says,
Carolina, I know exactly what you're talking about.
no one wants to be in an arms race in football except as a fan of a team that always loses the arms race, unless if you lose it, then it's a bad deal. No one likes incentives. I think we have to, turn up our noses to some extent, but while I appreciate the concerns raised by our fellow council members, I do think on the whole that the benefits of this far outweigh those concerns, and I'm not saying that there might not be some other projects down the road where we decide and we look at it and we say, no, the concerns outweigh the benefits, and, when that day comes, we can vote accordingly. But I think in this instance and on this proposal, I think the benefits outweigh those concerns.
Thank you.
I agree as well, and certainly with my background and perspective, when we had textiles here, it was great, but we don't have that anymore, and so we have to be a little more creative and figure out what we can draw, and this is an excellent opportunity to do that.
Yeah. Does anybody else in your group want to speak? Rob?
No, sir.
Well, I'd like to entertain a motion if we come out of public hearing.
Motion.
I'll second.
Richard motion.
And I'll second.
Got a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, that brings us.
No.
He said no.
We're just going
public hearing.
Aye.
All right.
You really enjoy the public hearing, want to keep
that going. Item number 6 is consider the approval of a resolution providing a level 2 tax grant and approving a development agreement for the River West Business Park. Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, 3-2.
Now, the concern about the contract issues, that can be worked out.
Yeah.
Other situations.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Next item on the agenda. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Don. Item number 7 is a one-year time extension request for conditional zoning ZA 2017.02, approval of the Tower Crest neighborhood.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As read into the record, this is a request for a one-year time extension for a conditional zoning project. A conditional zoning was approved for the subject property, which is about 2.24 acres in size, in January of 2018. That approval was for a 12-lot, single-family detached home subdivision on the corner of Oak Street in South Main. The applicant did get approval of construction plans. However, they have come back in, and the infrastructure design is very costly and time-consuming. We've had a lot of engineer meetings because we're concerned about stormwater drainage over to the across the street to the cemetery. So it has to be a pretty robust design. So going back and forth in discussions, we've taken a step back, and the applicant has decided to modify their plans to reduce the development to 10 lots, which will help with the infrastructure size and still reach the goal of ensuring that we won't have any problems downstream. So what we find is the construction plans have been modified. We're coming up to the one-year timeline for the construction plan, so we've indicated to the applicant that they need this time extension so we can continue to review and approve their construction plans, and they feel that they can achieve that and pull the permits to start construction within the next year. The plan on the left is the original 12-lot subdivision. This was a unique design because we were trying to limit curb cuts, especially no curb cuts on South Main, and limit them on Oak Street as well. So it has an alley design. The design on the right is the revision on file. There are still some modifications that will be done, but they have reduced it, the overall design, to 10 lots. So with that, we're asking that you consider their request for this one-year time extension, which would extend it to January 6, 2021.
We have a reduction of lots.
Reduction of lots.
That's the first.
Yeah, I'm not having a complaint about that.
Yes.
Let me ask one question.
Yes.
At such time as the plans were revised to reflect all this, would that revised plan then need to come back before planning and zoning and ultimately city council?
No, they're at an administrative level now. They're during construction plans. So they have a conditional zoning, they're given a certain amount of time to get approved construction plans. Then when they achieve that, they have a certain amount of time to pull the permits and get the construction going. We're coming up to that year
Because the
mark.
conditional zoning was up to 12 units. Because, even reducing to 10, they don't have to come back before us.
Yes, reduction in lots does not, it's administrative approval modification.
I would motion to approve the one-year extension.
I'll
second. And I'm sorry, I should have added before I wrap that up, this was really quick. The applicant's team is here. John Russell is here, there he is, to answer any questions you may have.
We love you, John.
The one-year extension is fairly straightforward. It's one-year extension. So I'll motion.
And I'll second.
Got a second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
There's no reflection on you, John.
Is that my stuff now? Good job, John.
Hold on. You're on your feet tonight.
You want a drink of water, John?
I'll be good.
So should we go through the reports and everything before the closed session, or how does that work?
Yeah, so the next section
Yeah, be good.
are the minutes from the various either city council committees or citizen advisory boards. I won't go through all of them, but you've got the...
I did have one comment or question. I noticed that, I think this is the second time in maybe as many months that the Tourist Development Authority has not had a quorum. Is there something that needs to be done in order to get us to a quorum, or what's going on with that?
One of the young ladies, I can't recall her name, but she is in some sort of leadership training, which is in conflict with us, and there's no other one person that's causing an issue. It's different people at different times. I've had conflicting meetings arise, or illness, etc. So it's just,
It's an issue.
it's unfortunate,
We
but
have to address it. I think do we have a quorum on Thursday or Wednesday?
I won't know till Wednesday.
Well, I mean, I'll be there as
I'll be
usual.
there, yeah.
But yeah, because we haven't been able to vote on some things, so we're probably going to have to enforce some. We're pretty lenient on attendance policies on all of our boards. We're probably going to have to enforce,
Make it a point.
enforce that. And we lost. I mean, the hotel people, if they have a meeting come up, both of them are out. And then we added somebody, and she's been to every meeting. I feel bad because she hasn't been able to vote once. Yeah, it's an issue. I think Richard and I both recognize it, and our chairman recognizes it.
That's good.
Adrian, I mean, it's frustrating as the ones that are there.
It is.
So,
But it's a waste of time.
yeah.
Waste of time.
Yes.
Especially in the middle of the morning.
Especially at 10 a.m.
Yeah.
But if you can mention that to them about being prompt and being on time to their meeting, I think that would be a good thing. Okay. All right, next item?
Yes, so the minutes of the Tourism Authority, the Board of Adjustment, Environmental Sustainability Board, Main Street Advisory Board, Downtown Belmont Development Association, Public Safety Committee are there for your review, and no action is needed on those. So for the manager's report, I'm sorry we didn't recognize him at the beginning of the meeting, but I want to thank Cramerton Commissioner Donald Rice for joining us this evening and attending our meeting. It's always nice to see elected officials from other towns. I hope you've enjoyed the show tonight.
You've had an experience, haven't you, huh?
Y'all have a lot more fun at y'all's meetings than we have.
Just wait.
So I think that's great to visit other towns, and maybe we could do that, or maybe...
Welcome to come to Cramerton or from regional.
Thank you, but thank you for joining us, Commissioner Rice. Point out that the annual Belmont Unity Day service, which is our Martin Luther King service, is on January the 20th at 7 p.m. at First Foursquare Church, and you are encouraged to arrive a little bit early, at least by 6:45, to get a seat for that service. The 20th, it's at 7 at First Foursquare.
At 7 p.m.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Be there at 6:45, though. Or earlier.
Yes. I noted in here that the recently elected city council members, Martha Stowe, attended an Essentials of Municipal Government training that the school of government puts on, and Councilman Seelinger and Councilman Heffern and I will go to Winston-Salem for that same course later in the week, which is good. You've got the binders here, so it's just a good overview of what we're supposed to be doing as local government, you as elected officials. That course used to have the state required ethics training. It doesn't anymore because they've condensed it. So we do have the on-demand version of that the clerk has. So Jamie, if you'll send that to the full council, Martha and Mark and Jim are required by law to take that because you're newly elected and re-elected. But we offer it to the entire council. It's just.
Did you say ethics?
Ethics, yes, sir. Yes, sir. And then as a
just as a follow-up, I believe that there's a certificate at the end that you'll have to print out and sign, and that needs to be turned in to me once you do it, but you can do it on your own time.
Do you need a paper copy? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I mean, you can always email it to me.
Okay, yeah.
But no, I can print it here.
Okay.
It has to be actually filed.
Okay.
The City Council retreat will be Friday, January 31st, and Saturday, February the 1st at TechWorks. And our facilitator wants to interview the council members individually, and Jamie Campbell will be contacting you about scheduling those
What time will we start on the 31st?
It's typically around 5. I'll verify that. We're finalizing the agenda. So we'll provide supper.
I'm glad we're at TechWorks this year.
Yeah, be a little bit closer than the Whitewater Center. The Transportation Committee, as I mentioned earlier, met on Thursday, and the committee recommended the projects that we would submit for funding. We will bring that. They met Thursday, so we didn't have time to get it for you tonight, but at your February meeting, we'll have the list of projects that they recommended go to the MPO for consideration in Spot 6.0 funding. The MPO board will advertise for those projects, but won't make a decision on them until until March. So we have time for you to consider those in February and have an official endorsement of the City Council of those projects. The Public Safety Committee needs to meet sometime in January, and that's Council Members Schrift, Seelinger, and Stowe. We have an update from the fire chief for the question that Councilman Seelinger had about response times and the 911 system. Also,
Eagle Park.
yeah, and then we could talk about Eagle Park again. And then the Water and Sewer Committee also needs to meet, so we'll reach out to those members and schedule that meeting. I did, in one of my emails to you, mention that both local chambers of commerce have their annual banquet coming up in January, so please let Jamie know if you want to attend. The Montcross Area Chamber of Commerce banquet is on January the 23rd at 5:15 p.m., or no, 5:45 p.m. That's in Mount Holly. And then the Gaston Regional Chamber is a lunch meeting on January the 30th at 11 a.m. at the Gastonia Conference Center. But we can send that information back out. Also, the Montcross Area Chamber has a sponsorship opportunity available to us for $1,000 if we want to be a sponsor. We've not done that in the past, to my knowledge, but Mount Holly and Stanley are sponsoring it this year, so I just wanted to offer that to you if you're interested in that. The sponsorship comes with 8 tickets, so that would cover the cost of 8 tickets we've not done it in the past, but that doesn't mean we can't. So if you're interested, we could.
I'm not opposed to it. I mean, you're going to have to buy the tickets anyway, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it sounds fine.
Okay, just $1,000. Yeah, I will pass that on to the chamber. And then I was asking Chris Ray for an update on the automated card feeder code enforcement case that you heard in December, but you should have all received a card for the Morrows and with a picture of the trusses that were delivered on site. So they are making efforts to repair that building. So they've got until February, so we'll continue monitoring that throughout this month and have an update for you at the February meeting.
I just want to state for the record that no one can now tell me this is a thankless job because we have literally been thanked.
Yes, you have one thank you.
Yes.
Still get it faster than others.
I had one additional question. Do we need to schedule interviews for vacant board seats?
Yes, and actually, Andy Miller from the Planning and Zoning Board will be relocating to Charlottesville, Virginia.
Oh,
so his seat, he had a job opportunity, a good move for his family up there, so I hate to lose him.
Yes. Yeah.
So we'll need to fill his position as well.
Okay.
And so we do have a list of folks who applied last time and interviewed last time, and we are advertising for those, so we will try to schedule those shortly as that work ramps back up.
Yes.
And that's all that I have for manager's report.
All right. Any comments by any of the council people? Would like to, other business?
Yeah, I've got a few. Just some housekeeping. The construction on Dogwood Lane, where it tees, one of the construction trucks knocked down the stop sign. So where Dogwood and Dogwood meet, that sign is down. We've got 2 storm drains on Dogwood that are full of leaves that need to be cleaned out. One is on the street. One is the storm drain that backs up to, I can't remember his name, it's across from my house. But anyway, there's a drain on the street level and then a gully that goes down to the creek. And that gully is just completely full of debris, so the water's not traveling down the gully, it's spreading out all down the side of the hill. So if they could clean that catch basin that leads to the creek.
I'm not familiar with all the details.
I'll get with David.
Get with David, and if it's in the right of way in our system, we'll do it. If it's a private drainage ditch, obviously we can't do that, but we can certainly do what's
We
city.
certainly can clean the catch basin if it's on the edge of the street. Now, beyond that, we wouldn't be able to do that. The stop sign will put back up in the morning.
Okay. Also, I was nominated to chair the Gaston Cleveland Lincoln MPO by Ellen Fraley, and I did get elected chair by unanimous consent, so I was glad to have their endorsement.
You're the chair?
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you. The NCDOT bonus allocation program, which we touched on at our transportation meeting. This program, if we were to invest in local road projects, meaning taking city funds and match them to local roadway projects with the MPO in the state, that will elevate our projects, because now we've got time horizons on some really bad intersections of 2029, and the one at Keener and Central, I think, is 2025. So the program, if we just round numbers, if we were to contribute $1 million to one of these projects, it would move up in scoring substantially, and that time horizon would come down substantially. Added benefit is the DOT rebates the city 50% of that to go toward another city roadway project. So we would actually be getting $500,000 back to put toward another road project here in Belmont. So at this retreat, I mean, I know you've asked us for topics. I'd like, if anybody has time to look into, familiarize themselves with that bonus allocation program. It's a good program, and one that we should have a serious discussion about leveraging to get some some of our needs met here locally, because the time horizons on some of these projects, when you get them funded, is still a long process, and anything that we can do to shrink that is worth looking at.
We did it here tonight.
Write a check. Write a check.
Write a check?
Isn't that what we kind of did tonight? Was, in a way, get a bonus allocation by putting some money in, and then the other groups put the money in, and then it moves it up faster. So I think that's an awesome program. I think we should talk about it at the retreat.
That's good.
I'm a little perplexed. I mean, we got Economic Development Commission, Donnie Hicks, the county commissioners, our state representatives. We got the Greater Gaston Development Corporation. We got a lot of people working in different directions, and we got a ton of mixed signals coming out of Belmont right now, and it is something we're going to need to resolve. We're trying to compete with other states. On a state level, we're trying to compete with other counties, we're trying to compete with other municipalities to bring stuff in here. And our current image right now is we don't want it. And there are a lot of things we don't want, but then you're gonna get stuff that you have to take eventually. And I think we need to be talking about that at the retreat. I have no idea what this board thinks at this point. I mean, we're funding the GGDC to help us bring businesses here, which was just here, and then we're not all on board with that. So we gotta figure out who we are, and maybe we're shifting directions. Maybe we need to write a letter to Representative Torbett and Baumgardner and the county commissioners and just tell them to focus on other areas, not in Belmont. And I mean, we gotta send somebody some direction. If we're not gonna ask them for it, we gotta tell them we don't want it. Right now, we're just sending mixed signals, and it's not gonna give us a very good reputation in the region going forward. I'm concerned, and I think we need to address that quickly.
And you're right to be concerned. We're conducting, not all of us, but we're still having business conducted on Facebook, and that's not appropriate. And his reference to that for the past 24 hours, a number of people have apprised me of what's going on because I normally don't monitor it. So it makes us look very unprofessional and dysfunctional, and that's not the image we want.
Well, I would disagree with that to some extent, because I did post what we were going to take up, but did not post any opinion on it. Now, people commented on that and may have had a certain view, but that is their opinion. In social media, they can put that out there if they want to, but I mean, to say, because we put out the agenda, I mean, I put out what was on here, I put out something about the road projects and basically the numbers for these two grants. People did put on some things, that was their opinion, which may not have been accurate, but I can't control what people say, and I don't know how that reflects on us. People are allowed to have their opinion. I know, we've tried to shut down people on Facebook, myself included. I mean, at one retreat, there was a concerted effort to find a way to shut me down, and Parks was good enough to point out that it was, free speech. At another retreat, Roger Hudson was assailed, because of his comments on Facebook. And, it was said that, he never comes to a city council meeting, that, he's one of the least informed people in Belmont, but he still has a right to his opinions regardless of what you think about him.
But we have a social media policy so that we don't have information out there that shouldn't be. And both of you gentlemen are going to have to protect me at this point, because I'm being assailed and it's not appropriate.
So it's the misinformation.
I think that's a topic we need to look at the retreat in great detail.
How about if somebody's caught with a false statement 3 times, then they're not allowed to use it? I just feel like we should hold ourselves at a higher standard than the general public.
Yeah, this is a retreat topic. We definitely need to look at the ethics policy and social media policy.
Because if you share false information, I mean, that's just not ethical in my opinion. And we've had that happened multiple times in the last year.
Ryan, I tell people if they want to talk to me, they can call me.
That's good, Charlie.
Or email me, because when you get on Facebook, everybody sees it, and it's not always a good idea to do that right there. It's not illegal, but they advise you when you go to the schools up in Raleigh to be careful with that stuff.
Yeah, the Institute
Get you in a lot of trouble.
Well, you do have a Facebook policy which applies to employees, and we are not employees of the city. We do represent the city, but There is a technical difference there. Now, the city puts its agenda out on Facebook. I put portions of the agenda out on Facebook. Same information. People comment. I mean, when you were referring to Roger Hudson's comments,
I don't remember what you're talking about, but.
I'll update you on it. That was on the city's website. People are responding, making comments directly on the city's website to things that are posted by the city. So, I mean, you've got the same problem on the official outlet.
Well, I think we need to put that on our topics for the retreat. I think that's the best.
I think when a citizen says something, it's perceived that they don't have all the information. When a council member says something that's inaccurate, that's different. We should have a higher standard as elected officials in the community to only use accurate information if we're going to disseminate it out. I mean, what if I just said something that was completely false about you or anybody else? I mean, I think that's kind of slimy. So, I don't know. I think we need to fact check what we say. I think we need to be ethical. I think we need to be factual. I mean, this isn't Washington. We live in a town with 12,000 people. Saying how people vote when it's not accurate, saying something costs something when it doesn't cost that, saying that the city manager turned down something that he never turned down. I mean, this is just a continuous basis of just lies, and it's inappropriate. So I think we need to address that at the thing, and I think we need to address it with whoever's going to come in and run our meeting too. If other communities are having this issue, I have a feeling it's pretty unique to us, but we'll see.
I mean, I think there are, a lot of our constituents are on Facebook, so I see that as it's obviously a double-edged sword, but I think it's also a valuable way of reaching people who can't spend 2 or 3 hours sitting in a city council meeting several times a month. So that's the way I view it. Obviously there's, you can't control what people say either. I don't think it's fair to blame myself or Richard or anybody else for what other people say on something that I post. As far as I'm concerned, I'm responsible for what's next to my name. So,
excuse me though, I think you have some responsibility if you put information out there and you see something come across that you know is not correct or you question it, and I'm being maligned, then you have some responsibility there because you're in control of that.
I mean, I'm not going to say the internet. If you see something that,
I think this is something that we can pick up at the retreat, obviously.
I think it was the retreat talk. We need to stop it at this point.
I think, we need to have a more fulsome discussion, and it's not, this is not the forum in which to do that. We've got the retreat coming up, and I think, I think it's fine to have disagreements and to not, I don't think we're necessarily required to vote 5-0 on everything. I think it's fine to have disagreements as long as we are respectful of each other, and, a lot of times if something does come before us, like I always told my con law students when they wanted to debate on some of these Supreme Court cases, if there are, if it's a 5-4 decision and some of the best legal minds in the country disagree on it, well then, yeah, it's something that reasonable minds can differ. There are legitimate points behind each side, and I think it's fine for us to have fulsome debates as long as we respect each other's opinions, but, I can tell everyone from sitting there for several years, it does come off, it reflects poorly on all of us, I think, when we sit here and bicker, and, maybe we need to have a fulsome discussion at the retreat, but I'd like to see us, I think it's fine for us to disagree and advocate for our respective positions, and we put it to a vote, and that's fine, as long as it's done in a respectful manner, but, I really, one thing I'd like to do, having come up here, is to stop some of the bickering that goes on during these meetings, because I don't think it reflects well on any of us. You can debate whose fault it is or who started it, but, we're all adults, we're all professionals, and, I think we should try and take the high road and, conduct business in a professional, respectful manner.
I agree. That's why 10 minutes ago I said, let's look at it as a topic at a retreat.
Yeah, and I agree. There's many instances where people have been assailed up here, and they shouldn't be.
And I unfortunately have been the culprit, not appropriately in most of it, for the past several months. So I'm more sensitive to it, certainly.
encourage people to come to the council meetings and make their statement 3 minutes at the public comment, you know? They can do that. They can do it.
We can discuss this at the retreat.
Yeah. We have a closed session we gotta move into.
Yes.
So I'm gonna make a motion, we adjourn if everybody feels like.
Not adjourned.
Motion.
Attorney-client consultation.
I will make a suggestion that we have a bathroom break.
Yeah, Ryan.
Council Chairman, would you second Ryan's motion to go in?
I'll second.
Martha Day.
All in favor?
See you. Thanks for coming up.
That's all right. I think one thing we need to discuss.
Are you Mr. Wall?
No, it's Mr.
Well, we're gonna try and do something about it.
I'm gonna try to get that traffic circle moved up. Armstrong and South Point Road. There's some text there. There's some. They're not gonna do that because their time study says that traffic circle is gonna be more effective. And the state submitted the traffic circle. They want the traffic circle. They do not want.
If people learn how to use it.
Yeah.
It's just that when you get up there, from my house to Interstate 85, in the morning, at 5:45, my wife's chief officer of American Airlines, so she drives her every day. And it will take her 35 to 40 minutes to get to the airport. Just to get up to the focus.
Yeah, no, I don't doubt it.
Because you can't, because now, and then the middle school there, and I talked to Jim, is that the middle school there is going to make it worse. And no turn lane for the middle school.
Well, I mean, the issue with that is, we had to enter into an agreement to pay $400,000, partner with the county, to get the school built there. At that time, we were allowed to apply our TIA to the school. The TIA identified a lot of issues, such as the turn lane, and several of the roads with turn lanes. After the deal was penned, the legislature reversed their position on that and said, well, no, you can no longer apply your TIA. So we were locked into having the school there, but locked out of being able to get that money from the school. So the school's going to be built, but we're not going to have the money that we negotiated getting the school there in good faith that we were going to receive that money. The legislature took our ability to take that money away from us. So it is going to be a problem. But, there's a lot of things that we can do under this bonus allocation program to get these roads fixed, but it's going to take revenue to do it.
I'm over here from Greensboro, and I live in Greensboro for 47 years. Because you can't get out of that place. I mean, it's just like, my God, in the mornings, it's just.
You need a bridge down there that goes across the river.
And just for me to get from my house to 85 this morning, I had to go to Greensboro this morning. 85, it took me 45 minutes.
If you get down there, across the river, the airport is, it's a mile across the river. And you gotta go the whole way, how long have you been here and you figured it out? 2 years now.
I moved here because my wife, I'll tell you that. I'm retired from the federal government, but it's, and it's just, I am on business. And I operate Monroe Airport.
That's a hike.
Well, it is for me, but I have a control tower. I do air traffic control.
Okay.
For airports that don't have control towers. I do air shows all over the country.
I'll say air boss. Literally.
I've been doing it now for 35 years.
Control tower.
Yeah, well, I'm really the only one that has it. I've been 39, almost 40 years.
Why did, so you do it for shows?
No, I do it for, I do it to Masters Golf Tournament, I do it for all the football games.
I was gonna say, like, pride for football.
I was gonna do Winston when they were gonna shut down the Winston Airport.
Yeah.
And, cause I worked in Greensboro, I ran Greensboro, the tower there for a long time.
I do, most of my business comes from NetJets.
Yeah, I worked them a lot.
I bet you, especially at all those events, because that's what all the guys are.
Ole Miss.
Oh, God.
It's owned by, it's owned by the university, and they put more jets on that airport than you can imagine. And it's more money coming in. And when they played LSU, I've never seen anything like it.
That's, so in Gastonia, they're trying to make the airport wrong. And everybody's like, well, why? It's like, well, now you can get NetJets to fly in there, which means for all these games, you're going to get another airport.